DSNY has submitted its proposed draft SWMP to the State Department of Environmental Conservation for initial review. The council was permitted to have a copy of this revised proposed draft SWMP, thank you, and in doing so, we were able to review public comments on the draft. We have read and analyzed these comments and referenced some of the most apparent concerns in our committee report. One unifying factors among these comments is the proposition that the city must have thoughtful and specific long-term plan for managing its waste with actionable steps and timelines. The purpose of today's hearing is to hear from the Department of Sanitation about their incorporation of public feedback into its revised proposed draft SWMP and to discuss their priorities for finalizing the document. We also look forward to hearing from the city's IBO on these Independent Budget Office, in case people are watching and don't know what these acronyms are, apologies, on these matters, as well as their recent reports on the city's efforts to increase organic waste recycling. And last but not least, we are eager to listen to testimony from the public. We're also hearing two pieces of legislation today, both sponsored by Councilmember Sandy Nurse, a former chair of this committee. These includes intro number 355 in relation to organic waste recycling by city agencies and resolution number 125 calling on New York State legislature to pass and the governor to sign legislation requiring the establishment of a composting program at dormitories, dining facilities, and other facilities owned, occupied, or operated by the State University of New York, the City University of New York, and institutions subject to their jurisdiction. First, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Virginia Maloney for joining us. Good morning. I look forward to the dialogue today. After our committee council administers the oath, we will move to testimony by the DSNY, then testimony by IBO, followed by testimonies from the members of the public. Committee council.
Good morning. From the Department of Sanitation, Commissioner Gregory Anderson, Deputy Commissioner of Solid Waste Management, Jennifer McDonald, and Executive Director of Resource Recovery, Catherine Kitchener. Please raise your right hands. Thank you. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the council members and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Sanchez and members of the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. I am Gregory Anderson, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Sanitation. And I'm joined by Jennifer McDonald, our Deputy Commissioner for Solid Waste Management, and Catherine Kitchener, our Executive Director of Resource Recovery. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I can't tell you what a privilege it is to start my second tour here at Sanitation. And to be before you as commissioner of an agency that serves every single New Yorker by collecting and processing 24 million pounds of waste every day. As a young person coming to this department at the start of my career, I thought I knew what that entailed. I thought I knew what it meant to pick up the trash, sweep the streets, fight snow, and the topic of today's hearing, I thought I knew what happened to it next. But back then, I was like many New Yorkers. I had little idea of how much work, how much meticulous planning, how many late nights and early mornings go into every single part of this operation. I quickly learned that strongest is more than just a name, and that this department includes many people whose strength goes well beyond the physical. The people of DSNY are strongest in mind, in heart, and most importantly, in care for their communities. And the trash doesn't just disappear when they get it off the curb. Collection is only the beginning of a labyrinthine journey through transfer stations, material recovery facilities, on trains and barges, and on to final reuse, recycling, and disposal facilities. I have often said that the parts of my career that I am most proud of are the times I've been able to stand shoulder to shoulder with sanitation workers, tradespeople, IT staff, and everyone else at the agency. But the fact is, we have so much more to do together. New Yorkers depend on us, and they expect us to do more than just repeat what has worked well enough for decades. The city is changing, and we must change along with it, in both the parts of our work that they see and the parts that take place behind the scene. So that's the goal of this solid waste management planning process, though 2026 is far different from 1992 and 2006. In the past, solid waste management planning in New York City has been an exercise in crisis response. From the 70s to the 90s, mayors and sanitation commissioners tried to rapidly adapt to changing regulatory landscapes and public perceptions around outdated waste management approaches, including ocean dumping, unregulated incineration, and barely regulated urban landfills. These conditions led to the 1992 Solid Waste Management Plan, or SWMP, as we'll call it from here on out, which included the city's then novel curbside recycling program, several new material recovery facilities, never built, and the construction or retrofit of several modern waste-to-energy facilities, also thankfully never built. This plan served a single purpose: to extend the life of Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island into future generations, a goal that quickly changed. The 1996 mandate to close Fresh Kills landfill by the end of 2001 created another, more significant crisis, one that led to the 2006 SWMP. The Fresh Kills landfill was the last option for in-city disposal for the millions and millions of pounds of waste generated in homes, schools, businesses, and elsewhere in New York City every day. And its closure was catastrophic for other parts of the city. This waste had simply nowhere else to go. In just a decade, over 100 transfer stations opened in a handful of marginalized and disadvantaged communities in the South Bronx, North Brooklyn, and Southeast Queens that together saw thousands of new daily truck trips and the health and safety challenges that come along with them. The closure of Fresh Kills landfill, a well-intentioned endeavor to be sure, created one of New York City's most significant environmental injustices of the 20th century. That 2006 SWMP was a groundbreaking attempt to correct this wrong and create a sustainable, reliable, and resilient residential waste management system in the post-Fresh Kills era. It called for the conversion of older, outdated marine transfer stations into modern facilities to containerize waste for long-haul transport by barge and rail. It also called for several new enclosed rail-based transfer stations that would use the city's then flagging freight rail network. It called for the construction of a state-of-the-art material recovery facility that would accept much of the city's recyclables by barge and export many of the sorted products by rail. These new facilities would stabilize a beleaguered recycling program, substantially reduce the number of trucks that traveled through overburdened neighborhoods, and create a reliable, though costly, forward-looking program for waste management. Unlike the 92 SWMP, the 2006 SWMP has been largely implemented to plan. Its implementation required over $1 billion in new capital investments and the siting of very controversial new facilities. It took a decade and a half, 3/4 of the plan's planning horizon, to realize. And in my 10 years with the department previously, much of my time focused on realizing the goals of the 2006 SWMP. Building new, more modern facilities despite intense opposition, reducing transfer station capacity in overburdened neighborhoods, and expanding recycling programs and driving diversion rates upward. Today, our solid waste management system continues to face challenges, including rising costs, the existential threat of climate change, dwindling regional waste disposal capacity, and global forces that dictate trends in waste generation and markets for reclaimed materials. However, our waste management system today is sound. It is reliable. It is resilient. It is not perfect, but it is far more sustainable than those of the past. We have one of the most inclusive curbside recycling programs in the country, and the Sunset Park MRF continues to innovate on sorting and reclamation technologies. We are among a handful of cities in the US that can claim true circularity in our paper economy, as recyclable paper and cardboard is remanufactured into new cardboard products right here in Staten Island. We have the largest mandatory curbside composting program in the nation, and one with tremendous growth potential. We export the majority of residential curbside trash collections not by truck, but by rail and barge, the only major city in the country to do so. In sum, New York City has some of the most comprehensive and sustainable residential solid waste programming in the country. And we are implementing hard-fought, comprehensive reform of our commercial waste industry, a process that will be completed next year. That's the context in which we started 4 years ago to create the next iteration of New York City's solid waste management plan, what we're calling SWMP 26, the very plan we're here to discuss today. So just a little context. State laws and regulations lay out a pretty strict regulatory framework that governs the creation of a new SWMP. And this document has been carefully tailored to meet these requirements and guidance from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. It has been 20 years since the last time New York City submitted a solid waste management plan. And in that time, the waste stream and waste management industry have noticeably evolved, and the state has clarified and updated requirements for solid waste management plans. So I would like to emphasize 2 points. First, the regulatory requirements that have evolved significantly since 2006 now require a 10-year planning period rather than 20. And second, while the SWMP provides a framework for diversion and efficient waste management systems, the city can and must pursue specific programs that are not contemplated in this document. This is, by design, a beginning of the process rather than an end. And our record here speaks for itself. Neither universal curbside organics collection nor commercial waste reform were laid out in the 2006 SWMP, and yet the city took historic action to move both policies forward in partnership with the City Council. This is particularly relevant to keep in mind as we discuss SWMP 26. DSNY's rich history of evolution, continuous improvement, and innovation lays the foundation for this next solid waste management plan that we are proud to put forth to guide future progress in waste reduction and resource recovery for the next decade. With over 24 billion pounds of waste generated by hundreds of thousands of businesses and millions of residents across the 5 boroughs every year, the 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan is a flexible framework focused on the areas that have the greatest potential impact. This SWMP was built upon an extensive analysis of current conditions, and the first chapters document in detail who generates how much of what materials, where they go, and what end-of-life options exist for managing them. From that foundation, coupled with DEC's alternative analysis requirements, the SWMP identifies 8 key program areas to achieve continued progress in waste reduction, increased recycling, and a path towards zero waste. Of the progressive and ambitious commitments, organics diversion remains a top priority, most importantly continuing to increase participation and recovery rates from generators citywide. We will investigate how we can leverage new equipment to better separate contamination from collected organics, encourage the donation of edible food, and plan strategically for future processing capacity. In addition to the full implementation of the Commercial Waste Zones program by the end of next year, 2027, the SWMP dedicates an entire program to the reduction, diversion, and recovery of construction and demolition debris, a first for this waste stream. And most importantly, waste reduction is the leading program, the area with the most potential to truly reduce the amount of material discarded and the associated costs and logistics of managing it. Finally, underpinning these future-focused goals is an unwavering commitment to the robust and resilient system in place today. The future DSNY envisions with this SWMP is one where all the resources in the city are managed responsibly and to the best value. Whether it's advancing textile-to-textile recovery, turning food scraps from our diverse cuisine into biogas to support our clean energy transition, or developing new ways to reuse materials in future manufacturing industries, this solid waste management plan is designed to facilitate the steady transformation of materials management citywide. We began the formal outreach for this SWMP in 2024, starting with city agencies that, in partnership with Sanitation, make up the planning unit responsible for implementing SWMP 26. DSNY has conducted outreach with elected officials, including current and former members of this committee, borough presidents, and engaged with dozens of interested parties and stakeholders, including the Borough Solid Waste Advisory Boards, or SWABs, the New York City Climate Leadership Group, the EJ Advisory Board, and the Transform Don't Trash Coalition, among many others. In response to requests from stakeholders and members of the council, DSNY extended the public comment period to 105 days, 60 days beyond the 45-day review period required by DEC. And this public comment period ended in January 2026. Through this public comment process, DSNY received more than 800 individual comments in 62 submissions that cover around 300 topic areas. DSNY has made multiple updates to the draft plan based on these comments, additional input from collaborating agencies, and some corrections and clarifications identified internally. Following these updates, DSNY submitted a revised draft to DEC for review last month, and Sanitation is working with our agency partners to provide written responses to every comment received, which will be included as a further attachment to the plan later this month. Looking ahead, we will make another round of edits to the plan based on DEC feedback, which we expect to receive around July of this year. We plan to submit the final plan to DEC this fall before moving on to what is the real work, implementation. The work of implementing the plan will double down on the collaborative approach that sanitation has taken in creating it. The 124 initiatives identified in the draft SWMP require the creation of at least 6 standalone stakeholder committees or working groups that will persist well beyond the final approval of the SWMP. And moreover, I personally commit to an inclusive, responsive, and adaptive approach to the implementation of this plan. My door is always open to any and all parties with interest, ideas, and criticisms related to planning for waste management in New York City. Turning now briefly to Intro 355, sponsored by Councilmember Nurse, which would expand composting by requiring DSNY to adopt a rule to require city agencies to source separate organic waste produced through meal service or institutional feeding. DSNY strongly supports this bill and other efforts to continue to increase the amount of organics separation happening throughout the city. Thank you so much for your interest in the solid waste management plan and for scheduling this hearing. I'm thrilled to be back in front of a much changed committee on sanitation and solid waste management. Thrilled to be in this fancy new room for the first time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I do want to say that we are welcomed by our Councilmember Susan Zhang. Commissioner, I do want to take the time once again to congratulate you on your appointment as the new commissioner. I know that you've been in public service for a long time, and I'm looking forward to the work that we can accomplish together. To start the conversation, I do want to give you the opportunity to also just introduce yourself again to folks, and to have on the record just more about you, your vision for the department in general, how you view your role in helping to carry out the agency's work, and any waste management policy and programs you hope to see the department prioritize under this administration. And before I let you get started, I want to also say that we have been welcomed by my colleague, Councilmember Ty Hankerson. Oh, and please let us not forget Councilmember Ina Vernikoff.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as I said last week at roll call, this is really a homecoming for me, and the Department of Sanitation really does truly feel like home. The men and women of the department who work tirelessly are more like a family than a job. And I spent almost 10 years with sanitation previously, starting as chief of staff, finishing as deputy commissioner, and I'm so excited to be back here and back working with this agency and working on behalf of the people of the city of New York. I did spend the last 2.5 years in the governor's office as the deputy director for state operations, so helping to manage the 70 plus agencies, authorities, offices, commissions, et cetera, that make up New York State government. So I have, I think an interesting new perspective on the work that we can achieve. I have an interesting new perspective on the solid waste management planning process, having managed DEC directly. So that's kind of fun. And come back to New York City, I think even more focused on delivering real results for New Yorkers. Some of the things that I really want to prioritize, first and foremost, making sure that we actually achieve the promise of our curbside composting program. So driving up participation, driving up diversion, giving all New Yorkers the tools to be able to participate in the way that's right for them. That does mean leaning on enforcement at some point. Doesn't mean that enforcement is going to be the first tool in our toolbox. So looking forward to working with all of you to make sure we can get the word out and educate New Yorkers about how to participate. Second, one of the things that I was most proud of my first tour at sanitation was working with then Chair Antonio Reynoso and the whole committee and a legion of advocates to pass commercial waste zones, comprehensive reform of the commercial waste industry. We are in the process of implementing that now. That process will be completed next year, but the work there will never stop. So I'm very excited to dig in on that industry, to continue to roll out the commercial waste zones program, and to make sure that we're achieving the goals that we set forth there around safety, around sustainability, around customer service for businesses. And I think there's the department has done a lot of really good work, and I look forward to digging in there. And then the last thing that I'll focus on here, there's probably hundreds of things that I'm excited to work on, but the last thing I'll say here is really digging into the work around waste containerization. I think there's, I've already had some really good conversations with staff of the department around how that's going and where we go next, and hopefully we will be talking about expansion soon.
I know I have kind of a little idea of where you could go next, just like a slight. It reminds it starts with a B, ends with an X. So let's talk about the 2006 swamp. So we have had 20 years since the new swamp. What is the current status? And I know a lot of this is outlined in the swamp already, but for folks that have not read it, can we get some highlights on the current status of some of the major infrastructure projects outlined in the 2006 swamp, including the marine transfer stations and waste processing facilities? Also, what delays, if any, have affected implementation of the 2006 swamp, and what steps is DSNY taking to get it back on track?
Absolutely. So the work of implementing the 2006 swamp was largely completed in 2019 with the opening of the East 91st Street Marine Transfer Station. That was the last of 4, what the swamp calls converted marine transfer stations, but it's not really converting an existing facility. It's transforming those facilities into new modern waste management facilities. So starting in 2015 through 2019, the department opened the 4 new MTSs. It also worked with its private partners in waste management to open rail-based transfer stations in the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, as well as a department-managed rail transfer station in Staten Island. So those facilities together make up our waste management network. All trash is containerized into sealed containers for transport by barge and rail, or just rail, to final disposal destinations, with the exception of the west side and southern half of Manhattan that goes directly to Newark, New Jersey for disposal. That was an incredibly arduous process to get those facilities built and operating. There was pretty substantial community opposition in neighborhoods where we were converting marine transfer stations to the new facilities we have today. But I'm proud that we got through that opposition. And I think largely the communities that host those facilities would say that we are good neighbors, and I think some of the most serious concerns about potential impacts have not been realized. The other main focus of the 2006 swamp was the construction of the Sunset Park MRF, which was completed and opened, I think, around 2013. That facility remains, among the most state-of-the-art in the country. We continue to work with the operator there to make investments in new sorting technology. We're looking increasingly at robotic technology to be able to better sort material that we deliver there. And we are going to continue to work with them on improving the quality of the recyclables that they're able to generate and sell into market. So that's sort of the comprehensive picture of the swamp. There are a few things that have changed since 2006. One marine transfer station that was not constructed on the Gansevoort Peninsula in Manhattan. I think we could get into whether or not that facility would even still be relevant today. But largely, the swamp was implemented as written, although on a much longer timeline than originally projected.
Great, thank you. I'd like to also mention that we've been welcomed by council members Gail Brewer and Chanel Thomas Henry. So there were a number of public comments, and I want to thank the team for extending the comment period because it did bring in a number of new comments. I know that was a lot of more work for you, but thank you very much. How many entities did submit a comment to DSNY on its proposed swamp before the January 16th deadline? And did DSNY receive any comments after the deadline? And if so, how many?
Yeah, so we received 800 individual comments that were packaged in 62 submissions. So some of those were submissions that represented comments from multiple individuals sort of put together. Those covered 300 topic areas, and we did receive a couple after the 5 p.m. deadline that day. I don't think it was a significant number.
How many staff were involved in reviewing the public comments, and approximately how many cumulative hours were spent performing this work?
So we had 2 staff that were primarily responsible for reviewing the comments. Obviously, we have teams of subject matter experts who got into the detail on the comments received. So in total, it was dozens and dozens of individuals, but 2 staff primarily responsible. I don't have a total number of hours, but it did take about a month's time to go through all the comments and identify, both sort of sort them and categorize them, and then identify potential changes that would be made to the draft plan as a result.
Understanding that the public comment period is over, does the agency plan to host any future public meetings on the swamp? And if so, do we have an understanding as to when these meetings will take place?
We don't have anything planned immediately. As I said in my testimony, we do plan to do a significant amount of stakeholder engagement in the implementation of the solid waste management plan, and there are 6 specific stakeholder working groups or task forces that are identified in the plan. Probably many more that will come out as we actually do the work. But we're very interested in engaging with the public, engaging with stakeholders, engaging with advocates as we actually move toward implementation of this.
I do want to talk about the stakeholders in the future, but I'm just going to stick to the comments for now, but know that I'm coming back to that. When does the agency plan to publish its responses to the public comments?
So we are working on a detailed response to each of the comments or each of the comment areas that will be submitted as an attachment to the draft SWMP. We expect that to be done later this month. The revised draft SWMP is posted on our website, and we will post those responses to comment on our website as well.
When was the revised draft posted to the website?
It was posted on Friday at my request.
Awesome. Thank you. And have you, I know it is still early, but have you received any feedback from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation on the proposed swamp thus far? And if so, can you describe the nature of the comments? Not that you can tell us exactly what they said.
Yeah, so it's been a very iterative process with DEC throughout the planning for the solid waste management plan. So we've gotten feedback from them consistently throughout. We haven't gotten formal comments on the most recent submission from March 2026, and we expect to, in 2 months or so. But we'll continue to be in touch with their staff as we move through the process.
And what is the expected timeline for engagement with DEC to finalize the proposed draft SWMP?
Yeah, so under their regulations, they have a 120-day review period. That 120-day review period ends late summer-ish. We will get their comments, assuming their comments are not incredibly substantive in nature. If they are, we may have to sort of take another look at the document and make substantial revisions. If they are not, we will make whatever revisions are appropriate and then submit the final SWMP for their approval.
And on this timeline, has DEC expressed permission for the city to continue its work to finalize the swamp beyond October of this year?
We haven't had to make that request yet, and we don't expect to based on the timeline that we're currently operating under. But we know that if we had to, they would be open to it.
What type of engagement can we at the council expect from DSNY as you revise the proposed draft SWMP?
So I think we'll certainly keep you fully in the loop on where things stand from a process perspective. I'm very encouraged by the fact that we're having this hearing today, which is the second hearing in 6 months on this topic, which is I think great. And as we move through the process, we'll keep you informed and involved. And if there's a need for another oversight hearing in the future, we're happy to be there.
Thank you. I have a lot of other questions, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues so you get some fresh air. I will turn it over to Councilmember Schwang.
Thank you, Chair, and very nice to meet you, Commissioner. I have actually a waste transfer station in my community. On page 10, the report claims having the Southwest Brooklyn Marine Transfer Station transport commercial waste overnight could not result too much noise or other had effect on this community. But this environmental impact assessment was done in 2005, 20 years ago. How do you explain that? And today it's so much shipping, many more delivery vehicles, and the result more trash. How can you justify using an impact report from 20 years ago to make decision today?
Yeah, so I think that your point there is actually fully aligned with where we stand on using the MTSs for commercial waste. We think that, one, we should fully implement commercial waste zones next year, let the industry stabilize a bit, and then take a really thoughtful and measured approach to accepting commercial waste at the marine transfer stations, exactly because neighborhoods have changed, the context has changed, the waste industry has changed. And so that's something that after we complete the implementation of commercial waste zones next year, we will look forward to working with the council on going forward.
And also, my community is probably 70% immigrants. How are you assured the burden of waste management doesn't fall most on poor communities? For example, the waste transfer station in my neighborhood, which is the largest immigrant, but many other waterside locations in richer community doesn't have those. How do you balance this?
So I think that was one of the key tenets of the 2006 SWMP, was to sort of spread the waste management network over a larger share of neighborhoods. Historically, there were 4 community boards in South Bronx, North Brooklyn, and Southeast Queens that had hundreds of transfer stations that were all truck-based, relatively dirty and polluting facilities. We have, because of the construction of the marine transfer stations, including the marine transfer station on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, we have been able to reduce the capacity, the permitted capacity at those other private transfer stations by more than 10,000 tons per day, which is a substantial reduction and has reduced the number of trucks going through those historically overburdened districts.
If you come to my neighborhood, you can smell that waste transfer station from far away. If you go through Belt, even you go from Bay Ridge area, when you pass the exit 20, and when I go on the way home around exit 2 there, you can smell how terrible it is. And then the city's decision seems like want to bring more garbage to our neighborhood. And then, the road in my neighborhood is not paved properly on time. The people drive vehicles have to have extra expense living in our neighborhood. How do you balance that?
I was actually just out at the Southwest Brooklyn MTS on Friday. I didn't notice any odors, but I'm happy to come out and meet you, and we can walk the neighborhood ourselves and get to see what the real impacts on the ground are. And as far as the condition of the roads, happy to talk to DOT about how to make real investments there.
And my neighborhood has the highest asthma rate in the city because the waste transfer station there, it was a incinerator there for 30 years. And the people living in the neighborhood has higher chance to get cancer. And then now, later on, the community fight against the waste transfer station for 10 years, finally built a lot of garbage brought to the neighborhood and the pollution brought to the neighborhood. We haven't seen more results there. Now the condition is, what we hear today is, we're going to bring more garbage to your neighborhood. And this is a majority immigrant neighborhood. I just want to give you background. A lot of people even doesn't speak English at all. People doesn't know where to get their voice heard. I'm proud to represent them, but it's not right to put more burden in those immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Swang. Now I'd like to bring up Councilmember Maloney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I want to talk about minimizing waste. There are some laudable goals around zero divertible waste of 30% by 2030, but much of this is dependent not just on DSNY and the DSNY infrastructure, but human behavior around residents and businesses. So could you speak to the investments that you're specifically making in education and outreach to try to change that behavior?
Absolutely. And, I would say the most important thing we can do to reduce waste is actually change the sort of economics of the waste industry. And that starts from the packaging and products industry that eventually creates waste. So we support a bill at the state level. It's called Extended Producer Responsibility. The bill itself has gone through a dozen different names over the course of the last 10 years. But basically what that means is the producers of packaging that make the things that are difficult to recycle or that have an expense to recycle, those producers would have to pay for the end of life management of those products. It also incentivizes the reduction in the amount of packaging. It incentivizes them to use more recyclable packaging, to not have several different types of materials all together in one product. So that's something that we strongly support. I know that the council has also voiced its support for that in the past. We're working with the mayor's office and state legislative affairs to try to get that through in the legislature this year. That's the most important thing we can do. That also unlocks a new funding stream that we can use to really dramatically expand our outreach and education programs. Right now, we do have an outreach team. We do education programs. We have a marketing campaign that we're running right now on the curbside composting program, specifically focused on people who live in apartments who want to participate, but their buildings aren't participating. And so we would love to do more and more of that, to do it across many different channels, to do it in as many languages as possible. And having a new funding stream from EPR would allow us to do that.
And how do you measure the success of those marketing initiatives? And do you also deploy your resources based on areas where you see a lack of, where you need more enforcement efforts, or based on density, or how do you prioritize the limited personnel you have?
Yeah, so we have a remarkable amount of data around how much waste is generated, where it's generated, and where it goes. A lot of that is in the solid waste management plan as part of what's called the current conditions assessment. But we are on a daily basis looking at waste generation, looking at waste diversion, and using that to tailor our programs to specific neighborhoods. The campaign that I just mentioned that we're running right now is focused on people who live in apartment buildings, and so it's running on the subways, it's on buses, particularly in neighborhoods that have more people that live in apartments. And what we're encouraging folks to do is, if your building doesn't participate in composting, call 311. We'll send out outreach staff to the building to remind them of their obligation to participate. And if that doesn't work, then we'll take the enforcement route.
And do you have any data on how successful that's been in increasing compliance?
Yeah, we're at the very beginning of week 3 of that, so we don't have a sort of full read on that. I think it's going to run for 6 weeks. So once it concludes in a couple weeks, we're happy to come back to you and fill you in on the results.
My last question is, as we look at the new initiatives that are proposed in the management plan, do you have adequate budget and staff to ensure high levels of compliance and the appropriate level of education and outreach?
Yeah, I think we have adequate funding and staff for the programs that we operate currently. A lot of the initiatives in the swamp talk about developing new programs, talk about working with stakeholders to identify new opportunities. Obviously, new programs require new resources, so that's something that as we go through that process, we'll continue to advocate for resources for. But at the moment, we have more than enough resources to operate the programs that we run today. I will say that there are some opportunities, I think, to identify new resources or potentially even make money off of the products that we collect. The paper that we collect, for example, we actually get paid for. And so the more we can divert material away from landfill, the better the economics get.
Thank you.
And this will do kind of. Thank you, Councilmember Maloney. I just want to piggyback off of Councilmember Maloney's question. So local law 88, I hope I have that number right. Yes, local law 88 requires community reuse and community recycling programs and community engagement programs. I'm curious, how do you accomplish this? Is this done through the department? Is it done through collaboration with Sanitation Foundation or other partnerships? And then when was the last time that you had these events, particularly in environmental justice districts?
Yeah, so I'll answer briefly and then hand it over to Kate Kitchener to address the specifics of those events. But our goal is to have as many events as possible in as many communities as possible. And, I think the key there is having partners like city council members, like community gardens and other community organizations who are really invested in bringing people to the events and making them really successful. So we absolutely would love to work with all of you to have as many outreach and waste collection events as we can possibly hold and make sure that they're successful. But Kate can speak to the specifics there.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So yeah, we, in compliance with Local Law 88 of 2023, we have 59 recycling events, one in every community district every year. You can go to nyc.gov/recycling events to see the upcoming schedule. Because it's Earth Month, we have tons of events happening. And so at those events right now, we're collecting both electronics and textiles for recycling. And we have, the department has a contract with the Lower East Side Ecology Center to conduct those events. And we often partner with elected officials to host the events in their neighborhood. And always happy to work with any of you to host an event in your neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Curious to know if you have this granular data, but how do diversion rates, given the EJ communities, how do diversion rates differ in EJ communities versus non-EJ communities?
I think what we really see is that diversion rates marry pretty well to density more than anything else, in part because people that have single family homes that have yards that generate a lot of yard waste, that yard waste is so unbelievably easy to divert properly. You're already generating it outside. There's no reason to commingle it with the rest of your trash. You can just put it in your brown bin and set it out for collection. So especially starting this time of year when people start gardening and spending more time outside, we see a lot of diversion in the organics program. In denser neighborhoods where you have multiple steps that the waste has to go through, it has to be sorted properly in the kitchen, and then it has to stay sorted properly in the trash room or the basement, and then it has to be set out properly for collection. There's obviously more opportunity for things to go wrong or something to get commingled, and so in those neighborhoods we do tend to see lower diversion rates.
Is there not, curious to know if there is any highlights in a difference, like, for example, in a community like Mines versus a community like Gales? Given we have very similar densities, but are there any different diversion rates that are, that we can see?
Yeah, the diversion rate is certainly higher in the Upper West Side than it is in Hunts Point at this moment, and that's something.
So, because if we're doing it based on density, I would consider the Upper West Side very dense. And so just trying to understand what, if there are any things that we can see based on the differences, given the density seems to be kind of similar.
Yeah, and I think that's something that in our last waste characterization study, which came out,
2023.
I want to say 23. Okay. I don't remember exactly when that was, but I remember working on it. One of the things that we looked at was sort of the stratification by both density and by median household income in the districts that we were sorting the waste from. It's something that I don't have the details in front of me, but I'm happy to go into detail with you at a later date. And as we look to the next waste characterization study for residential waste, which I think is required by 28, we will certainly continue that work and see if anything's changed since 23. Hopefully things have, but I would love to work with you on how to increase diversion in your neighborhood.
Thank you. And speaking of Councilmember Brewer, I will turn it over.
Thank you very much. I have lots of questions. First of all, I want to say thank you to a rock star. His name is James Lederer. And then also want to thank Superintendent Baldwin because he's great in Seven. And I had to deal with the East Side Transfer Station when I was borough president. That was hell. So I just want to say we did it.
We were there together.
God. So anyway, I just have a question. One of the problems, I call it service substitution. I know that also, I want to thank you for mentioning the solid waste advisory boards. I worked hard to get Manhattan to be as strong as it is now when I was borough president, and they are doing a great job. One of the problems is that I think if you could switch from more organics collection and then pick what you want to do less of, be it recycling or something else. One of the problems is that the buildings, the large ones that are not complain they have to keep the organics too long. Can you think about switching so you have organics, I'm making this up, 2 or 3 times and then recycling or something else less? Have you thought about that?
So I wouldn't want to decrease the frequency of recycling collection.
Whatever.
Only because it's already just
but
once a week.
organics needs to be picked up more often. Is that something that you're considering?
It's something that we can certainly take a look at. That would require additional resources to do so, but it's something that we're happy to take a look at.
Okay, because I think one of the problems is they keep it too long and then they complain in the buildings that it's causing a problem. So that would be something to think about. Second is when you do your education efforts, do you go for those that are persistently low participation? Is that where you focus? How do you focus where you're going to do your education, picking up on some of the earlier questions?
Yeah, absolutely. We do focus our education on places that have lower diversion rates. We also, in the past, have done targeted education and outreach to buildings that have received multiple enforcement violations for failure to recycle or failure to compost. I think that's something that we'd like to stand up again, particularly as we are looking to expand the participation in the composting program.
In terms of schools, I listened to your testimony on the cell phone. I don't think you mentioned the schools. How is their rate doing? In the past, what we would do is give certificates to those schools that are doing well because they do need some kind of support. It's not easy to do. Low staff numbers, low pay for the kitchen staff, etc. I work with all my schools trying to make sure that they do it, but it doesn't always happen. How are you working with the schools?
Yeah, so we work very closely with the schools, both to train the building staff, the staff in kitchens and the porters that actually collect the trash, as well as the teachers that are educating the kids and provide programming for the kids that are learning in schools themselves. So it's a 2-pronged effort. I think it's something that we can certainly spend more time on. I would like to bring back some of the programs from the past that focused on really celebrating the wins and celebrating schools that have done a
Could you
really
get
good
back
job.
to the committee the data on schools that are doing well, schools that are not, and that kind of information? My understanding is there's low on staffing in the kitchen for obvious reasons, and recycling goes out the door. That's my experience. So I'd love to see the numbers.
Yeah, we can provide you whatever we have.
Okay, Rikers Island, if it closes, which I hope it does, what 4 waste treatment plants will close to be able to have a brand new one there? Do you know which ones? My understanding is it's 4.
I think you're referring to wastewater treatment
I am,
plants.
yeah, but not. I know that's DEP and not
yeah.
you. But do you have any input into that at all?
I don't, and we would love to see a composting facility on Rikers
That's what I'm
Island.
saying. Could you also? That would be
that
something that you would
jail
consider.
closes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of NYCHA, that's an issue. How are you dealing with NYCHA? It's an ongoing issue. The chutes are small. I know the issues. What are you doing with NYCHA?
Yeah, so we continue to engage with NYCHA. Obviously, there have been challenges around waste management at NYCHA for many, many decades now, and we haven't found a sort of great set of solutions to be able to solve all of them at the same time. But we work with NYCHA on a regular basis. I think first and foremost to make sure that we are keeping, or that we and they are keeping the developments clean.
Do you have any pilots that are working with NYCHA?
We've done several pilots in the past with NYCHA. Kate or Jen, do you want to
Usually
talk
it's just
anything
going door
further?
to door with residents. That's not necessarily sustainable.
Hi, council member. Yes, NYCHA was very engaged in the development of the draft solid waste management plan. They're one of the stakeholder groups that's contributed to specific initiatives, and we do have some particular things we commit to working with them over time. They've been particularly innovative with a mattress recycling pilot that we have stayed in touch with them about and are considering
I
expanding.
see mattresses on the street, but okay.
Yeah, these are from the developments. They've also done a lot with redesigning their waste yards to look at how can they collect recyclables separately. That links in with the diversion rate, so areas where they consolidate waste on their different campuses. And one of the things they've focused on, to the commissioner's point, is the paper stream and how do they really extract the paper and cardboard that has value to the city. So we'll continue to work with them on all of those things.
Could we get some data on NYCHA also, again, back to the committee?
Certainly, and we also include some specifics on them in our biennial reports on the swamp that are posted on the DSNY website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. I just want to continue piggybacking off of first on NYCHA and then into organics. So 1 in 17 New Yorkers live in NYCHA, and I'm curious to know what is the buy-in or if you have that data, specifically diversion rates on NYCHA properties and NYCHA campuses as compared to the rest of the city?
Yeah, we don't have that data specifically for NYCHA because they're collected on the same household routes that collect the surrounding neighborhoods. But I would say, to the point you were making earlier, that parts of the city that have higher concentration of NYCHA developments tend to have lower diversion rates. I'm not saying that's because of NYCHA, but that is a correlation there. We have studied NYCHA waste in the past. I think one of our prior waste characterization studies included a subsort for NYCHA. And, I think I'm not going to beat around the bush. There are some very real challenges around waste management generally. And, our priority with NYCHA is keeping their facilities clean and having them be places that, really support the residents that live there. I think we should also focus on recycling, but keeping developments clean is our number one priority.
And when you say keeping developments clean, can you just elaborate what that means from the DSNY standpoint when it comes to NYCHA?
Yeah, I think just making sure that residents understand how and where to put out their trash and are doing so properly. In the past, there have been a lot of issues with people just not knowing how to do it. As Councilmember Brewer mentioned, a lot of the chutes are like this big. You can't fit anything in a chute that big. And so then people are forced to bring their trash bags downstairs. Do they put them by the door? Do they put them by the fire hydrant on the street? I think NYCHA has done a much better job now of being very specific with residents about what to do with the trash that doesn't fit in the chute, what to do if the chute's broken, which happens pretty frequently. And so I think that's gotten better, and that has been for the past few years where we have focused a lot of our efforts is being very clear about documenting and educating residents around what the proper waste management practices are, and then working with NYCHA staff and sanitation workers to make sure that that's being implemented across the board.
So I want to be clear that I am a fan of composting and organics. However, when you're looking at situations like NYCHA where you see, or the city in general, where you're seeing diversion rates with recycling are going down year after year after year after year, I'm curious why organics waste and the organics waste diversion is such a priority for the admin when our recycling diversion rates are abysmal.
So I don't think our recycling diversion rates are abysmal. We're capturing around 50% of the material that could be recycled on any given day. The reason that we're focused on organics diversion is because our capture rate on organics, which is a program that has been in effect for a much shorter period of time, is much lower. We are not capturing nearly 50% right now. We think that we can get some really substantial increases in both participation, capture, and diversion in short order. And so that's where we're focused. There's also, just from the perspective of the climate and greenhouse gas emissions, that's really where the largest impact is of the waste stream on greenhouse gas emissions is in organic waste. And so if we can maximize diversion there, we can have a greater impact on reducing climate change.
You said, I just want to make sure that I have the data properly. You say that we're capturing 50% of our diversion, but on the revised draft swamp, the waste projections on table ES9, it says that our diversion rate, if we stick to business as usual, will be 19.6% of DSNY managed waste. But if we implement the proposed programs, it'll be 20.6%. But you're saying that we have 50% diversion rate. Can you explain for everyone that might be looking at this where the difference is, where it comes from, and how we can?
Yeah, so the difference is that I was referring to the capture rate. So that's specifically for designated recyclable materials, things like commingled paper, cardboard in one stream, and then metal, glass, plastic, and containers and cartons in the other stream. Those materials together make up 33% of all of the waste stream. When we look at just that 32 or 33%, we are capturing about, it's usually just under 50% of that share. And so 50% of 33%, roughly 16.5%, that's the sort of traditional recyclable share of our overall diversion rate.
Great. So you see, everyone, they're not lying to you. The math works. Okay.
We'll have to do like a whiteboard explainer video.
Yes, please. I'm happy to pull it out. So according to the 2023 waste characterization study, approximately a third of residential waste is organic matter suitable for composting. What resources would the department need to divert all organic waste from landfills and incinerators? Is there a need for specific facilities, authority, or staffing resources?
So I think the number one thing that we need is New Yorkers to participate. And that's where our focus is right now, is increasing participation, increasing diversion, and getting more collected material. We have at this moment processing capacity for substantially more material than we currently collect. So that is not a constraint on us at this moment. If we were to collect 100% of the organics that are out there in the waste stream, we would obviously need more capacity, and that's where facilities like a potential future Rikers compost facility would come in. And as we have the good problem of New Yorkers separating too much organic waste, we will work with City Council on identifying where and how to build those facilities.
What are the major obstacles that the department encounters when trying to improve diversion rates?
I think the challenges that we encounter are pretty obvious. There's, I think, just general apathy around doing the right thing, and I think that's something that we've struggled with the most. There are much more solvable problems, which is giving people the tools to do the right thing, telling them how to do it, and we have focused a lot on those areas in the past, making sure that for example, every apartment building out there has their required recycling receptacles in the required places, making sure that they have a brown bin and they're using the brown bin. That's sort of the first step, but actually changing behavior and getting people to stop and think about, what should I do with this thing that I want to throw away? Which bin does it go in? And why should I do that? I think that's the more challenging area, and that's somewhere that we have more work to do.
And you just mentioned the brown bins. Given that organics make up a third of our waste, do you think that the brown bins that we currently have are appropriately sized to capture all of the organics suitable for composting in a household?
So we have in the past given out free brown bins to both single-family homeowners all the way up to apartment buildings. That's not something that we currently do because buildings are required to buy their trash cans. They should also be required to just buy their brown bins. You can go to Home Depot today and get department-branded NYCHA bins in various different sizes for your organics. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4, and take whatever approach is right for you.
Can the agency provide a timeline for when it would be able to achieve 100% or close, a suitable number of diversions of organics from landfills and incinerators? Or is there a organics diversion rate that the agency anticipates that we can hold you accountable for in 10 years?
I think we would love to get to a capture rate that's similar to traditional curbside recyclables. I think if we were able to do that over the course of the next few years, that would be a win.
Great. And how specifically does DSNY plan to increase organics recycling access for NYCHA residents?
So we've done a lot of work with NYCHA to make sure that they have brown bins that residents can use. We have cited our orange bins, the smart composting bins, at NYCHA developments in many cases and done specific outreach to NYCHA residents to make sure that they can download the app on their phone, that they know how to use it, that everyone who has a smart bin in their neighborhood knows what they're there for. I actually compost personally with a smart bin because I find it super easy to just drop it in on the way to daycare in the morning. So that's been, I think, our number one approach. We also work with NYCHA a lot on the amount of yard waste that they generate. So things like leaves, grass clippings, and other plant material. They have actually an incredible amount of green space. And if we can capture the yard waste that they're generating, that can make a really big impact. And so we focused a lot on their leaves during leaf season, making sure that they're bagging them separately and that we're actually picking it up separately.
Curious, has there been any dedicated outreach to NYCHA residents about, being a groundskeeper or a, organics lead or a recycling lead? Is there any conversation or any programs that exist like that?
Nothing that I'm aware of that currently exists. I am just a week back into this, so I will dig into that more. And if there aren't programs like that, I'm happy to work with you to set them up. Oh, and we do have, Kate reminds me, a program that we set up a few years ago called the Clean Buildings Training, which is specifically focused on giving people the tools to basically set up their building recyclables properly. So we do work with NYCHA staff to host that training. At the end of the training, everyone gets a certificate that I sign myself that certifies them as a trained Clean Buildings employee.
Okay, cool. I would love to see an expansion of these programs to really see NYCHA residents get a true workforce development program from DSNY with NYCHA residents. Something that I have seen in my own community is if you empower the local NYCHA residents with things to do, the other community members end up really falling behind, especially if you have your TA leaders or your presidents doing that. So if you can connect folks, I think we can see an increase, hopefully, knock on wood, in diversion rates if we really start integrating local community. You had mentioned Rikers Island. Curious, outside of Rikers Island, are there any plans to construct additional composting facilities similar to Fresh Kills? And if so, would these facilities be designed to accept both commercial and residential organic food?
So right now we
yard
operate
waste.
just the Staten Island compost facility, which is next to the former Fresh Kills landfill. We don't have sites identified at this time for additional food and yard waste composting facilities. We would love to work with the City Council to identify where those could go. It's not particularly easy to site and permit a new facility, waste management facility, even though these are compost sites. They are waste management facilities, and there are a lot of requirements under both the state regulations and local zoning that apply there. And so if we can work together to identify where those sites could be, we're happy to do so.
Great. And then one of the things that I have been very curious about and reading through the swamp is, if I'm not mistaken, restaurants have a 4% organics diversion rate, which seems absolutely outrageous to me. Are there any initiatives understanding why the diversion rate is so low when it comes to restaurants? Are there any initiatives to increase that? And are there any plans that you have seen either in New York or in other cities in the US or around the world that have been able to work with restaurants and really dive into the circular economy?
Yeah, so I think commercial waste zones, first and foremost, will have a big impact there because one of the requirements is that carters charge less for composting and recycling than they charge for trash collection. So there's a direct financial incentive for businesses to separate more both traditional recyclables and food waste. One of the things that I think has held us back here is that the sort of legal framework is very complicated. There are requirements around which restaurants are required to separate organic waste. It's a square footage requirement. It's not easy for restaurants to know, am I supposed to do it? Do I have to do it? Am I not required? So one of the things we'd love to work with the council on is just streamlining that and making it so that every food-related business has to separate their organic waste. We think that's a pretty straightforward thing to do, and timing it around the rollout of commercial waste zones, I think, would be the right way to go forward.
Luckily, I have my legislative director right in the front row, just taking copious amounts of notes.
We're happy to work with your office and with the committee council to get that moving.
And speaking about these partnerships, has the DSNY considered public-private partnerships to help construct composting facilities? And if so, can you describe the type and construct of partnerships demonstrating opportunities for success?
Yeah, so many of our recycling and composting facilities are public-private partnerships. They're either facilities on public land that are built by private entities like our Sunset Park MRF, or they're facilities that are operated by public or by private entities like the Staten Island Compost Facility. So there's a lot of precedent there for public-private partnerships, and it's something that we are certainly dedicated to expanding. We also did just last Thursday cut the ribbon on a new composting facility, more community scale, although certainly larger than your average community garden compost facility. This is in Gowanus at the new salt lot in partnership with Big Reuse and Gowanus Canal Conservancy. I think that model of sort of mid-scale compost facility, I think, is great because it allows people to get hands-on with the material. They can see the food waste and the yard waste going in on one end. They can see the finished compost coming out at the other end, and really participate in composting in real time. And so I think we would like to explore ways to expand that.
I have never heard something more Gowanus in my life. What specifically will DSNY do to ensure that our waste management practices do not intensify the burdens associated with biosolids derived from sewer sludge that is produced via the digestion processes?
So I think first and foremost, DEP is responsible for the biosolids management program. The SWMP does account for biosolids. We are required to under the DEC regulations. But we did a lot of engagement with DEP, but they are the sort of lead there. So we just incorporated their planning and approach in the plan. Jen, anything else you want to say there?
I will say that is one section that we updated post first draft, both based on public comment and input, and also DEP's revisions to this section, as the commissioner mentioned. Though that portion of the plan was updated to reflect some of the concerns expressed through the comments, but also the changing regulatory landscape for that material.
Thank you. And my last question in organics, if we do increase the organics waste tonnage by 20%, how would this impact existing contract obligations and costs?
So I think, as I said before, we have sufficient capacity to increase the amount of organics that we are diverting by a good share. I will say just very bluntly that the organics processing is not cheaper than disposal. So simply moving food waste from the trash stream into the organic stream doesn't in and of itself save money. I think as we expand the program and as we achieve greater and greater diversion, there could be some economies of scale that we generate there. And to the extent that we can use city facilities to manage our organic waste, obviously that's something that can save us money.
Thank you. And I would like to welcome Councilmember Hanif and also turn the mic over.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Commissioner Anderson. It's really great to see you, and I'm super excited by the salt lot opening up and Big Reuse, Gowanus Canal Conservancy operating that composting facility. All good stuff. I want to continue the line of questioning around organics. How is the department ensuring accessibility of the program for seniors and people with disabilities?
The program is today available citywide. Every single residential property in New York City has once a week curbside collection. And as we rolled the program out, we did offer free brown bins to every resident who wanted one. So we gave folks the opportunity to sort of request the bins, and then we delivered the bins ahead of the rollout of that program. So I think that's the sort of top thing that we've done. Our focus right now is on people who live in apartment buildings and making sure that that their building management is giving them the opportunity to participate. And if they are not, anyone can call 311. We'll send out outreach staff and, if necessary, enforcement.
And has there been anything more specific to ensuring that seniors and folks with disabilities have bin access, are compliant with their building?
We haven't had any specific programs focused on seniors, but I'm happy to work with you on what that could look like.
Got it. And then the same for like in terms of outreach to seniors and people with disabilities. Would be very curious what the engagement has been.
Yeah, I think there's definite opportunity there to do outreach, particularly through our senior centers and older adult centers. But to my knowledge, we have not specifically done that at this time.
Okay, good to know. In my district, we partnered with TechFin, a nonprofit that collects laptops from corporations. They also collect desktop computers. They repair the machines and then distribute them to low-income households. We distributed laptops to our adult literacy classes and would really love to know what opportunities are currently underway with the commercial sector to create a more circular economy for valuable materials like hardware, used hardware, rather than condemning materials to simple e-waste collection.
I think that's something that we would love to do more on. I think once we have commercial waste zones fully rolled out, we'll have a much better picture of the material that commercial businesses are actually generating, and we will have a much closer relationship with those businesses because we'll have only 3 carters per zone who are offering service rather than several dozen. So I think there's definitely a potential and a captive audience there, and we'd love to collaborate on expanding something like that.
And then does the department see an opportunity to expand commercial waste circularity from e-waste to furniture?
I think there is certainly a potential there. Wherever possible, it's better to reuse durable goods than to just recycle them. So certainly we would want to work with the reuse entities like Goodwill, like Big Reuse, and others to try to maximize the amount of material that is reusable, that is getting reused.
And then on construction and demolition waste. So the draft SWMP includes several proposals to increase reuse and recycling of construction and demolition waste, estimated at 2 million tons of material per year. Could you share if the department has considered comprehensive reform of this industry by setting rigorous standards for working conditions, safety, recycling, and community impacts?
So we certainly have considered it in the past. It's never been something that we've sort of put pen to paper on as far as drafting legislation. And my focus currently is on completing the implementation of commercial waste zones by the end of next year. After we get that done, I think we would be very interested in turning to the construction, demolition, collection, and processing industry. We do have, for the first time ever, a number of initiatives in the swamp around C&D material, and I think it's an area that we're excited to do more with, and I think more conversations to come, and we're happy to sit down with you and talk through what that could look like.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing up C&D. I want to know, so C&D is responsible for approximately half of the city's overall waste production. And we know with the current admin, the former admin, and just the general housing crisis that we are in, it's all about building. And when you build, you're going to have construction and debris. And we just approved a brand new project in the South Bronx that's going to even bring more construction everywhere. And so I would like to know, even though it's regulated by the city's Business Integrity Commission, from the agency's perspective, can you describe some of the most effective ways to reduce C&D waste production and what, if at all, will be the agency's role in trying to implement these programs?
Yeah, so I think there are both builders and haulers out there right now that do a really good job of sustainable deconstruction and recycling of construction demolition waste. There's a C&D processing facility / material recovery facility in Brooklyn that I think is certainly at the top of the pack here in New York City. There are also many facilities that simply take in material, they pull out whatever metal products that they can, and a lot of the rest just goes to landfill. That's certainly not what we want to see, but we don't have a great regulatory framework at this moment around capturing more of the material that can be recycled. So I think that's something that we are sort of starting to look at in this swamp, and will continue to refine as we move to implementation.
C&D was exempt from Local Law 199. I'm curious as to the appetite to bring it into compliance, if not, or were there specific policy reasons from the agency's perspective in which leaving C&D out of 199 is for a particular reason?
Yeah, I think that the focus of Local Law 199 was on the sort of curbside and containerized collection of waste generated inside of businesses. It's a much more predictable stream because those businesses are open all year long. They're putting out waste several times a week. With construction, demolition, debris, it's a much more sort of itinerant type of generation where you may have a building that's going up for a few months or a few years in one location, and then that generation stops once the building's done. There's no more construction demolition waste, so the sort of zoned model didn't necessarily apply as easily to the construction industry, but it's something that we're happy to dig into more with you. I will say, because it's a place that has so much emphasis from both from the mayor's office and from the city council as far as building affordably, we want to be very careful about introducing new regulations that increase the cost of construction. And so I think that's something that we will be very attuned to as we explore these options going forward.
Appreciate it. I think a lot of the costs are associated more on the maintenance and the insurance costs for buildings, not necessarily the construction piece. And speaking of construction, a lot of what we're trying to do with C&D is talking about how we recycle and reuse materials. I'm curious, has there been any research, or if you can share with us the research on the use of these recycled materials and their lifespan as opposed to other materials, how they shape up compared to other building materials, if you have those? I know you're not DOB, so I'm very aware of the limitations you might have, but as we're looking at these reuse and recycle rates, have we been looking at the data further before we move full steam ahead and doing all of these great reuse and recycle ideas, but will that make our buildings worse off?
Yeah, so I know we've participated in industry working groups around a couple different products specifically. I know we've done some work around concrete. We've also done some work around gypsum wallboard, and that's something that Kate and her team have been involved in. Kate, I don't know if there's anything specific you want to add there, but that's, I think, an area that the industry is really putting a lot of work into. We're more a stakeholder there rather than the primary convener, but certainly hear the point you're making, and we'll take that into account. We also have a waste characterization study for the commercial waste industry that is currently scheduled for 2032. So
we have an update where we are on that. Have you guys started the process yet? Or are you just...
We have not. We have a residential waste characterization study in between that's due in 2028. So that will be our first focus. And then we'll shift to the commercial study after that. But that will look at both the commercial waste zones, commercial waste, as well as the construction demolition waste.
Thank you so much. I would like to now turn it over to Councilmember Chanel Thomas-Henry.
Thank you, Chair. How are you doing today? I have a couple of questions surrounding illegal dumping. Are there any new ways of catching individuals? I know you have the cameras and you can catch the license plates, but in my district particularly, we have a lot of dumping where individuals are literally, they may not be driving a car. They're taking it from their homes and just dropping them in places. Is there any way to crack down on those type of offenders? And how successful has the program been with capturing the license plates?
Yeah, so the illegal dumping camera program, which largely ramped up under my predecessor, Jesse Tisch, in 2022, has been very successful. I don't have the camera numbers in front of me, but we have a couple hundred cameras across the city. We have really increased the amount of enforcement that we're able to do on illegal dumping. We also worked with you all in the city council to increase the penalties for illegal dumping, which I think has had a big impact on encouraging folks not to do it in the first place. So I think there's a lot of good news there, and we're happy to share more with you on how that's gone. One of the things that we're looking at now is how do we make the cameras more adaptable? Because right now, you spend a lot of money, you put a camera up in one place. Once that camera is there and people know it's there, they're going to avoid it. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at ways that we can use mobile cameras and really increase the sort of breadth of that program without spending a lot more money. 334 cameras citywide is the number that was just handed. As far as the other kind of dumping, which we technically refer to as improper disposal because it's not done with a vehicle, it doesn't have the higher $4,000 penalty. That is very challenging for us to enforce because we either have to see someone doing it or we have to very manually open up the bags, see if there's any identifying information inside, like a piece of mail or an Amazon box or something like that. We certainly do that and do write tickets based on that, but it is much more laborious than the illegal dumping cameras.
So with the illegal dumping award program, are individuals who actually catch people, be it the individuals who may not be in a vehicle, are they able to testify and do the affidavit if there is no vehicle involved?
So if there's no vehicle involved, currently no.
Okay.
But that's something that I would love to expand both the affidavit program for illegal dumping from vehicles as well as other citizen enforcement programs. I think there's a great model at DEP that has been very successful on commercial idling that I'd love to explore how we could bring that into the sanitation sector.
Okay, and last question, with the fine, like I know with the award program, half the fine would go to the person who who captures it. Currently, when the cameras catch someone, does half the award go into more sanitation pickups in that particular district or additional cleanups, or how are the funds dispersed? Do they go into a general pot?
Yeah, so right now those fines that are paid are going into the general fund. Okay. So they're not being reinvested specifically in the areas that have the cameras, but it's something that I think we would love to have a conversation with you about and with OMB about how we could potentially stand something like that up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to turn it over back again to Councilmember Zhuang.
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner, in my district, I have a lot of seniors coming to my office saying they are not able to go to buy those garbage bins city required. And then they order online last year. They still never get it. In the same time, they get tickets. And my office helped them to find those garbage in Home Depot, but they don't deliver. Is any city has any program to help those seniors? Probably some disabled people too with those needs. My office actually had a constituent service person went to the store with the constituent, bought that bin, bring to his home. For our office to do that for every single constituent, that's impossible. Is sanitation has any program to help those people?
Yeah. So first, I know prior to when I started, there were some issues with the NYC bins and with the contractor making deliveries that they were required to. I'm happy to say that every single order that was placed before the online orders were suspended last fall has been made as of March 30th of this year. So all of those orders have been fulfilled. The new model going forward is that they are available at retail at Home Depot. We're also happy to work with you.
They
if
don't
they're-
deliver.
I'm going to get there in 1 second. We're also happy to work with you if there are other community hardware stores or other facilities that want to sell the bins. We're happy to make them available through those retailers. And then the last thing is they are available via delivery through online delivery partners that Home Depot has partnered with, things like Uber and Instacart, and I think there's a third one. I'm on day 8 here, and have not been super pleased by how this program has sort of evolved over the last 6 months, and so would be happy to dig in with you on if there are specific ways that we can make bins available to your community members, particularly seniors and people with disabilities.
Yeah, senior probably they need the most. And also for RAISO 125, what's the cost of this? And can this institution shoulder it for RAISO 125?
We don't have a specific cost for the resolution, but I'm sure we'd be happy to work with CUNY and SUNY on what that cost would look like.
Okay, because I think it's a good idea, but I worry the cost is too big. And also for...
Yeah, and I'll just say that we already have curbside collection in every neighborhood in New York City, so that there isn't really a substantial cost for sanitation to provide the service, but there would be some cost on the CUNY and SUNY side, just as far as making sure that they have the bins that they need, that they have the training that they need in order to be able to separate properly.
So before we talk about the waste transfer station, we will have the commercial waste transfer waste come to like all the waste transfer stations, especially the one near me. What's the measurement you guys have to make sure those commercial trucks follow rules? And how, if they don't follow the rule, what's the penalty there? How the community monitor that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we do not have explicit plans today to accept commercial waste at the MTSs. It's something that we are going to start exploring once commercial waste zones is fully rolled out at the end of next year. And as we explore what that could look like, we're happy to work with you and other community stakeholders to do that in a way that works for the community. I will say that under commercial waste zones, we have an incredible amount of regulatory authority over the private haulers. We actually receive their minute by minute GPS pings. We know where all of their trucks are at every time of the day. We can really crack down on unsafe driving, crack down on emissions, crack down on failure to separate recyclables and all kinds of things that previously it's been very difficult for the city to enforce. And so I think that's the real promise of the commercial waste zones program, and one that I'm excited to realize at the end of next year.
Will that increase the cost for small business owners?
We've actually seen that the rates have not gone up as a result of the implementation of commercial waste zones, and in some cases have actually decreased because we're implementing a system that is incredibly efficient with only 3 carters operating in each zone. The carters can have much more efficient routes and operations, and so they're passing along those savings to businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zhuang. Briefly touching on street cleanliness, can the agency conduct a pilot to install multi-stream recycling stations throughout the city to improve recycling opportunities for people navigating city streets, like they have in Paris? If so, when could that type of program be carried out, or do you see that as not a part of the New York City scope of sanitation services?
So when we have had public space recycling programs in the past, just to be very frank, they have not been successful. In places where we have had public recycling litter baskets next to regular litter baskets, the material in both baskets looks exactly the same. And so, I think that's just because of the sort of budget constraints and operational realities, the department has moved away from those public space recycling receptacles. I think it's, I think there's more work to be done here, but litter baskets make up such a very small share of the amount of waste that we collect in total that I don't know that it's where I'd focus our limited resources if I had to pick and choose.
Great. And passing it back over to Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you. Just two quick questions. One is just to describe the incinerator. I know there are people in the audience who will bring it up. Where does it make sense? Where does it not make sense? I know in the past we're just not ready for massive incinerators in our kitchens. And so I wanted to understand commercial, residential, et cetera. And second, batteries. Obviously, when you have your Union Square event, it's the biggest event of the year, and we bring our batteries. But generally, I know I work with Lower East Side, and Christine can't take the batteries, et cetera. So I just want to know what, I think people just throw them in the wrong place. I wanted to ask about that. And then just finally, the company that used to take cartridges for our computers no longer does. So you can bring them back to the store, but I do think that's something that should be looked at. I have a horrible feeling some of the cartridges are also going in the wrong place.
Yeah, so on the first piece, I think you were referring to the incinerators, the food disposers in your sink. Yeah. So those are, on the residential side, they are perfectly legal in New York City. I think DEP has some thoughts on whether or not they should be the sort of broad-based solution.
They do, yeah.
And I can't speak to DEP's opinions there, but if a resident wants to have I don't know the non-brand name for them, but an incinerator in their house, they certainly can. I think there are always concerns around the sewer system and its capacity and fatbergs and things like that we have to be mindful of. And so even if you have an incinerator, you shouldn't put grease down your sink, for example. But I'm not going to sort of weigh in on whether that's a thing we should expand. Remind me what the
batteries,
other batteries, yes.
And cartridges and all that stuff.
So for batteries and e-waste, generally those are regulated under state law. The battery law was updated last year, I think, in part to address some really significant safety issues and concerns around fires, both in our trucks and at the recycling facilities. I think there's more work we can do there around making the people who manufacture and sell batteries be responsible for the end of life of those batteries and offer convenient collection options.
Thank you.
The same is true with all kinds of e-waste. That state law went into effect in 2015 and has not been updated since then. I think it's time for a fresh look at that state law to make sure that we are giving New Yorkers enough opportunity to recycle their e-waste properly.
Okay,
And that should be the responsibility of the people who make the product.
I mean, with the batteries, I'm very conscious of the batteries that are, blowing up in your homes and in the trucks. But then you also have the batteries for the flashlight and so on. And I'm just letting you know, in general, the battery issue could use some help so that people don't put them in the wrong place. And I think they are. We can't take them to the normal Lower East Side Ecology Center. They don't accept them, understandably. So I'm just saying we need to think about that. And also this cartridge store that used to take back cartridges no longer does. Something to keep working on. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, just to piggyback off of that, we just had a massive battery fire on Saturday with a number of families homeless right in the heart of the district. So this is a really huge issue that we're seeing all around the city. Speaking about residential, MSW, our favorite, has DSNY studied the feasibility of a save-as-you-throw or a pay-as-you-throw mechanism for the collection of residential waste? Oh, and before I continue on with my questions, I am so sorry. I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging our Councilmember Ung. Has the DSNY studied the feasibility of a save-as-you-throw or pay-as-you-throw mechanism for the collection of residential waste? If so, what were the findings and what are the greatest obstacles? And then in addition to that, has DSNY consulted with other municipalities on their program frameworks? And if so, which locations have you consulted and what programs do you think are most applicable to New York City?
So no, we have not formally studied save-as-you-throw or pay-as-you-throw model for New York City. We have, particularly in the context of expanding waste containerization, have been in touch with many, many cities across the United States, across South America, Europe, Asia, et cetera. And in the the course of those conversations have talked about both containerization and sort of fee models for waste collection. I think there's a broad spectrum of how different cities deal with this issue. Cities like New York City have the entire waste collection model built into city tax levy. There are many, many other cities that do that as well. Some cities, particularly in the U.S., if you think of more like Sunbelt cities like Houston and places like that, where there isn't the same density and everything is collected in containers, they charge a per container fee for waste collection services. And so I think there's a lot of different approaches that folks take, but we have not at this point formally studied Save As You Throw model for New York City.
Are there any opportunities to leverage competitive bidding or alternative disposal methods to reduce the average cost per ton?
I think there are certainly opportunities for bidding, but with the both increasing regulation and decreasing regional capacity for waste disposal, I don't think that our disposal costs are going to decrease anytime soon.
Speaking of the cost, what role, if any, does the waste volume play in contract pricing? And then how are contracts structured to account for potential fluctuations? Like, for example, any contracts that we may or may not have, will that be the same in terms of tonnage when we have the World Cup coming with all of these people?
Yeah, so our contracts are built with a tremendous amount of flexibility in them, so that, in the case of a Hurricane Sandy, for example, which created hundreds of thousands of tons of unexpected household waste and demolition debris, our contracts were able to take that material, and we were also able to stand up emergency contracts as well to be able to take additional material. So, we have the ability, if we need to manage the waste that New Yorkers are generating. But on a day-to-day basis, we can, when big events happen, we have certainly enough capacity to be able to handle those big events. As far as how the contract pricing is structured, nearly all of the contracts have a sort of two-tiered pricing structure. There is a fixed rate that sort of accounts for the things that don't change as the amount of waste changes. That's contractor staff operating the cranes at the MTSs. That's the sort of capital cost of purchasing the rail cars and the containers and things like that have to be purchased up front and don't really fluctuate. Then there's separately a volume-based charge or variable rate that's charged on a per ton basis, and that covers actually disposing of the material at the final disposal location.
And can you, if you have this readily available, can you compare the cost per ton in New York compared to other major cities that follow our similar tax levy model? It'll be unfair if you're talking about Houston or something.
Yeah, I don't have cost per ton in front of me for other cities. I think, to be very blunt, the model that we have here in New York City is not cheap, but it is not cheap because we've designed it to be incredibly resilient and reliable and to containerize waste. Putting trash in a sealed shipping container and moving it by barge and rail is a more expensive option, but it's one that we've deliberately chosen because it is the more sustainable option than trucks in overburdened neighborhoods.
Thank you. And speaking of waste diversion, one of the most effective ways the city can address the various impacts of our waste is to reduce the overall amount that becomes waste. So what are the most important steps that the agency will take to minimize waste produced by residents, institutions, and businesses over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so again, I think a statewide EPR program is the best step we can take to reduce the amount of waste that we're generating. The EPR program, as proposed in the state legislature, would require companies to both reduce the amount of packaging that they generate, make it more recyclable, and would provide funding for recycling outreach and education programs so that we can do even more work to educate New Yorkers about how to recycle and the importance of recycling.
Can you speak more about when specifically the department will be carrying out this work? Are there any identified timelines?
Yeah, so much of the work is already ongoing. These are programs that the department operates on a regular basis, and many of the new initiatives in the swamp are sort of tailored to identifying new opportunities, developing new programs, taking on pilots. So that will start as soon as the final swamp is approved by October.
Can the agency commit to a non-renewal of contracts for the incineration of waste?
No.
What does the agency perceive as obstacles to making this commitment?
So I think that the greatest obstacle we have is that New Yorkers continue to generate waste, and we have an obligation to deal with it. So, I think it would be a failure on my side if we collected waste and didn't have somewhere to put it. The reality of waste disposal is that there are two options in the United States. Those two options are either waste to energy facilities or landfills. Neither are good options, to be clear. Both have the facilities that we use today both have some amount of energy capture that happens either from landfill gas or from waste to energy, which generates electricity. But I think we would love to live in a world where we don't rely on those. But as long as New Yorkers create trash, we are going to have to continue disposing of it.
And how does the agency reconcile the health and environmental impacts of incineration with the city's present reliance on waste incineration?
I think we, number one, hold our contractors accountable to meeting their regulatory obligations and the permits in the state that those permits are issued, whether that's New Jersey or Pennsylvania or New York or Virginia or South Carolina. So, where we have had instances that individual disposal facilities have not met their permit requirements, we have really pushed the contractors to get back in compliance and have worked with the regulators to get them there.
What methods has the agency identified as the most effective for diverting waste from incineration? And is there a plan to carry out this diversion within the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think the most effective tools that we have are already in place. That's a mandatory curbside recycling program and a mandatory curbside composting program. The next step that we have to take is to work with New Yorkers and educate them on how to participate and make sure that we are actually doing it.
Curious if you've performed any analysis or studies of the public health costs of waste incineration incurred by the city as compared to waste export and incineration, and also compared to a potential 100% diversion of waste from incineration. If so, were there any findings?
So we haven't operated incinerators in New York City since, I think, 1992. So, the specific public health costs here in New York City, I think, are zero. As far as the impact of waste to energy facilities elsewhere, I don't think that's sort of in our remit as the Department of Sanitation.
Thank you. I was born in 91, so I'm very happy that in my first year of life, we stopped incineration. We were the chair of sanitation from the beginning. What is the DSNY's current curbside and containerized diversion rate for full fiscal year 26 based on the 19.4% diversion rate from the first 4 months? And how does it compare to the 28% original target?
So the current curbside and containerized diversion rate is 19.8%.
Do we know
for the first 4 months?
For the first 4 months.
Yeah, that was in the
and sorry, I had you at 0.4. Apologies. 19.8.
I think that may have been the FY25 final.
Okay, and then do we know where we see the FY26 final to potentially be?
Yeah, I think we're going to land somewhere around that 19 or 20%.
Okay.
That's what we've seen so far. And clearly we'd like to increase that number as much as possible. We think that curbside composting is the place that has the most potential to increase that number, but also would love to see more recycling as well.
Okay, great. Now back to commercial waste. Can you provide an update as to when do you think the department expects to complete implementation of all 20 commercial waste zones?
End of next year.
End of next year. December next year, or an earlier, or by the end of December 31st?
It will be done in advance of the 31st of December, but we're still, we have not yet promulgated the rules for the last several commercial waste zones. We expect to do so in the next couple months.
Okay. So by December 29th, I'll be looking at you. Does DSNY have the adequate resources and staff to implement the CWZ system citywide?
At this time, we do.
Great.
And we continue to evaluate as the program grows, but at this moment, we have the staff we need to continue implementation.
With this current staff and with the current fees and the pay schedule, do you think that the budget and the admin fees currently paid by the CWZ awardees are sufficient enough to enforce the environmental justice, safety, and workers' rights goals of the program?
We think they're appropriate for the program that we have today. I think one of the things that as we continue to implement more zones, I think we will be paying a lot of attention to the enforcement resources in particular. This is not a space that we have done a lot of enforcement in before. That was previously the responsibility of the Business Integrity Commission. So as we take on those enforcement responsibilities, I think it's something that we'll be very mindful of.
So the Queens West CWZ implementation phase is listed as TBD. Has the department encountered any issues when planning for this implementation?
We haven't encountered any issues. I think there's some market consolidation that's taking place in the commercial waste industry that we are having to account for as we roll out zones to make sure that we're still offering businesses a choice of 3 carters per zone. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is how do we make sure that, as carters participate in mergers and acquisitions, that we are then bringing in other options for those zones. And so that's something that's continuing this year. And as we roll out additional zones, we want to make sure that there are 3 carters available.
Will the department commit to requiring commercial waste data and publishing it on open data in the same way data on residential waste is currently published?
Yes.
Great. Can you please outline the steps the department will take to ensure that when recyclable commercial waste is collected, it is routed to a final destination where it can be ultimately reused or recycled?
Yeah, so I think two great innovations of commercial waste zones that we've never had before are individual tracking of individual trucks. In the GPS system that we have, they're required to not only track the trucks, but tell us what kind of material those trucks are collecting. Second, we have individual dump ticket level data for the first time ever for commercial waste. So we're going from having a very hazy 30,000 foot picture of the commercial waste industry to a very granular picture of how much material is being generated, by whom, and where it's going.
Wow, new eyes on the ground with sanitation. Thank you. Has DSNY worked with any other city or state agencies to identify methods to reduce the impact of commercial waste truck traffic on communities surrounding the waste transfer stations? If so, what methods were identified and which of these could be feasibly implemented and when?
Yeah, I think we've done a lot of work with the Vision Zero Task Force led by DOT and the Mayor's Office of Operations, in particular around commercial waste trucks generally, but very specifically those 3 parts of the city that I mentioned earlier, South Bronx, North Brooklyn, and Southeast Queens. We also have worked very closely with the Business Integrity Commission, for example, to roll out the requirement for side guards on commercial waste vehicles, to roll out the requirements for emissions retrofits on commercial waste vehicles, both of which were implemented last decade. And as we continue to roll out commercial waste zones, there are requirements there around investments in cleaner trucks, investments in safer trucks, additional safety technology, things like lights, cameras, things like that make trucks safer.
One of the things that I would love to see, and I have heard that as the MTA has transitioned to their electric trucks, the breakdown times of the trucks have increased substantially. So before, a lifetime of a bus would be, they wouldn't break down for 10, 15 years. Now they're, have to do a repair after 2-3 years. Has there been any studies looked at into, as we're, increasing the greenness of our trucks, if you will, the electrification of our trucks, have there been any studies or understanding on how that transition has affected other cities around the country or in other countries, and how that factors into any of the new contracting or procurement that you're doing for new vehicles?
Yeah, I think what we have seen as we've implemented more sustainable fleet technologies over the course of the last 20 years is that the more components you put on a truck, the more components that could potentially break. So, I think 15 or so years ago, we were rolling out diesel particulate filters for our trucks. We realized that you have to PM the diesel particulate filters themselves. Otherwise, you'll have to down the entire truck when the filter gets clogged. So I think that's something that it's a learning curve. It's not necessarily something that makes the trucks less reliable, just an additional step that you have to make sure you're taking. For electric vehicles, what we've largely seen is because there are fewer moving parts, they actually tend to have better uptime than other vehicles. But then you also do have to take into account things like charging time and other things that are make them more operationally complex.
Sustainable fleet technology. That's a much nicer way of saying that. As you can tell, I only had one cup of coffee today. What alternative, I want to focus on waste export. What alternative waste management strategies is the department exploring to mitigate rising export costs, and what are the projected savings?
Yeah, so again, the best thing we can do to mitigate rising export costs is to divert more waste or reduce the amount of waste we generate entirely. We think that the Extended Producer Responsibility Program, currently being considered by the state legislature, is the best way to do that. And that would also generate dedicated revenue source for recycling programs and for outreach and education.
What role do you see organic diversion programs playing in reducing the volume of waste requiring export, and how, if at all, is this reflected in the SWMP cost reductions?
So the organics makes up a third of the waste that we generate today. Today we're capturing a small share of that. As we increase the share that we capture, then obviously we're sending less trash to final disposal. I will say at the moment, organics processing is not cheaper than disposal, although, again, as we achieve economies of scale, as we continue to expand programs, we hope that dynamic changes in the future.
How has the SWMP's reliance on borough-based waste management facilities impacted the overall cost of waste export, and what adjustments are being considered?
So, as I've said a few times, the approach of the 2006 SWMP was not one sort of crafted around cost as the primary factor that we were solving for. It was reducing the impact of waste facilities and waste trucks on overburdened communities and creating a reliable, resilient system that would not be sort of subject to the various waste crises of the past. That's the system that we've created. It is not. It is certainly not the cheapest option we could have taken. It would have been much cheaper to just have very poorly regulated transfer stations that used truck export and had material impact on the surrounding communities. But we as a city made a decision that was not the approach that we wanted to take.
We're going to get to transfer stations right after this, but my last question on waste export, I want to know what percentage of waste export contracts include price adjustment mechanisms tied to inflation or fuel costs, and how much have these adjustments been added to the city's annual costs?
Yeah, so the contracts do include a number of different inflators for various costs, including fuel cost, including CPI and things like that. So there's an annual sort of calculation of what the new both fixed and variable costs is for each contract. That's a process that Deputy Commissioner McDonald's team goes through every year. And they do fluctuate with market prices. Obviously, we have not yet taken into account the current fuel prices that we're experiencing because of the geopolitical situation in the Middle East, but we expect that will have an impact as well.
Thank you. And your favorite topic from 2006, marine waste transfer stations. How has the utilization of marine transfer stations evolved since the 2006 SWMP's adoption, and what operational challenges or efficiencies have emerged?
Yeah, so we think the marine transfer stations have been remarkably successful. They operate really well. They have, there have been some learnings around how those transfer stations were constructed. For example, we had a certain method of constructing the floor at the transfer stations that I don't think took into account the amount of wear and tear that driving large FELs around would have, and so we had to rebuild the floor at 2 of the marine transfer stations because of that. But I think they have worked really well. I think in general, what we hear is that there has been relatively little impact of the operation of those facilities on the surrounding communities, and where there are impacts, we have done an incredible amount of work to try to mitigate this.
How has the environmental footprint of waste export changed with the increased reliance on MTSs, and what metrics is the department using to track this?
Yeah, so it's from a sort of greenhouse gas emissions perspective, it's much more sustainable to rely on barge and rail transport than it is to use diesel-based truck transport. So that's, I think, the primary indicator that we're looking at is just the overall greenhouse gas footprint of the waste export system. And that has decreased substantially since we started building the rail and barge network 20 years ago. And I think that the more important factor is the burden that these facilities place onto New York City's communities, and I think we have been able to successfully reduce that burden pretty substantially.
How does the department evaluate the cost effectiveness of marine-based waste export compared to truck-based or rail-based methods?
So, we don't necessarily evaluate it. We know what the cost of one is versus the other, and we've made a decision that we want to go with the more sustainable, more reliable option.
What is the current budget allocation for maintaining and upgrading MTSs, and how does this align with projected needs?
So we have both capital funds for major facility upgrades as well as a dedicated O&M staff at the transfer stations. I don't have the specific sort of total dollar value of that in front of us. But for example, we do have $59 million in capital funding for capital upgrades, equipment, and system replacements at the MTSs over the next 5 years. So that's, I think, illustrative of the fact that we are investing in those facilities.
Thank you. And are all of the existing city-owned MTSs operating at their full capacity? If not, what are, if any, cost implications stopping this?
Yeah, so many of them are not operating at full capacity. The North Shore and Hamilton Avenue MTSs, which are in Northeast Queens and Western Brooklyn, respectively, are probably closest to full capacity, but we don't have any regular capacity constraints at those facilities.
Given that there are no capacity constraints, what can be done to increase capacity at the MTSs?
So again, those two
At the city-owned?
Yeah. So those two, North Shore and Hamilton Avenue, are operating closer to capacity. So they already operate on multiple shifts and are receiving waste and processing waste on multiple shifts. Other facilities, for example, the East 91st Street MTS, receives waste on multiple shifts, but only processes that waste out and actually puts it in boxes, puts those boxes on barges on one shift a day. So if we were to see more waste go through that facility, we'd have to run more shifts in order to accommodate that.
Okay. And of the DSNY managed waste, particularly, that is processed through an MTS, what percentage is tipped at a privately owned MTS versus a city-owned MTS?
So there are no privately owned marine transfer stations. There are 1, 2, 3 privately owned rail transfer stations. I don't have the exact split in front of me, but I just do the math in my head. It's roughly 50-50 between the private rail transfer stations and the publicly owned marine transfer stations.
Has DSNY performed a cost-benefit analysis of permitting CWZ awardees to tip at one or more of the MTSs, including the cost savings for avoiding unnecessary tolls, labor costs, and fuel costs? If so, what were any findings?
Yeah, so we haven't done a detailed cost analysis yet. Again, we are focused first on implementing the full commercial waste zones program by the end of next year, before December 29th. Which is our new deadline. And once we have that implemented and sort of see the industry stabilize, then we will look to the potential for commercial waste at the MTSs.
Has the department studied any of the specific savings and costs that both private waste collectors and the city could incur by utilizing the East 91st MTS for commercial waste collected in Midtown? If so, what did the study reveal?
Again, we have not. I mean, I think there are, the cost to the disposal cost at our facilities is higher than the disposal cost at private facilities. Again, because of the complexity of the system and the amount of reliability and resiliency that's built into that system. But obviously, it is closer to Midtown than transfer stations in northern Jersey or North Brooklyn. And so there could be operational savings on the Carter side. We would have to work with the Carters to understand those.
Just getting my notes in order. Okay, let's quickly move into the legislation. Great. And then I'll end with some final questions. But with the legislation, can you describe any operational challenges the city would encounter implementing intro number 355?
No, as I said, we already have curbside compost collection on every street in New York City. So as additional city facilities join the program and set out waste, we are happy to collect it. There should be little to no operational impact for us. That said, our partner agencies will have to bear some, I think, pretty small startup costs around acquiring bins, acquiring signage, training staff, and just making sure that they have the right systems in place to manage that waste. But that's mostly a one-time cost and shouldn't have a really substantial recurring basis.
Speaking of our lovely sister agencies, can you list, or do you know any of the city agencies that are currently known to source separate their organic waste? And can you list the agencies that engage in meal service that you understand to be covered under this bill?
Yeah, so I don't have a full list in front of me, but agencies that are already doing it today, the New York City public school system separates organic waste at every facility. The Department of Corrections separates food waste at Rikers Island, and they actually have a compost facility that we run on Rikers Island for their waste. There are other entities that separate their organic waste as well. I can think of off the top of my head a couple of firehouses, a couple of homeless shelters that participate today or have participated at some point in the past. When this bill is implemented, it would cover additional facilities like ACS, senior centers that serve food. Who else? Additional homeless shelters, health and hospitals, DYCD, et cetera. We don't have sort of a full list of everyone who would be in because we have to go agency by agency and understand who's doing that kind of institutional feeding or providing meals. But I think that's what we would focus on over the course of implementation.
For clarification, when you say New York City public schools, or is it just our district schools, or are charter schools also included in that as well?
Charter schools that are in DOE buildings would be participating in composting.
Oh, the camera's on. Just, public schools. Can you, what percentage of the city's agency's workspace is located in a building or location that is owned by the city?
I don't have that number off the top of my head.
So for programs like composting, recycling, even in a building like 250 Broadway, these buildings do not have the facilities to properly adhere to those regulations that we have set out, making it much difficult for institutions like ours to comply with regulations. What are some of the most common challenges encountered by agencies in buildings like this and in implementing their recycling programs and their composting programs?
Yeah, so I think just to use this building as an example, this building is operated by a private landlord. The city council is a tenant of that landlord. This is a building that I think will benefit greatly from the rollout of commercial waste zones, and the Lower Manhattan zone is actually rolling out right now. We opened up the implementation period on April 1st. It runs through the end of May. So as this building identifies their commercial waste zone hauler, that hauler is required to provide information about how to recycle, is required to provide recycling service, to offer composting service. And so we would expect that that the building does participate. We will also have a lot more information about which buildings are participating, how much recyclables are being collected, so that we can tailor our enforcement and outreach appropriately.
That's really great. Looking right at the camera, 250 Broadway, I'm looking at you. Has the department taken any additional assistance to help agencies implement organic waste recycling programs where the agency's workspaces are not located in city-owned buildings? Is there a proper planning method, a handbook, a guide?
Yeah, so agencies are actually required under a local law from many, many years ago to submit recycling plans to the department. And we do follow up with them to make sure that they are submitting those plans, whether they're in a building that they own and manage, a building that's owned and managed by DCAS, or a private facility. They're all required to recycle the same way. Well, actually, they're not required to recycle the same way. In city-collected facilities, it would be separate paper and MGP recycling. In many private buildings, it's single-stream recycling, and so that would be a difference there, but the requirement to recycle is the same across the board.
So I want to turn to environmental justice, and I will take a point of personal privilege and talk about the Bronx, which if you look at the map, I forget exactly what figure it was, basically where you show the environmental justice communities, the entire Bronx is blue. Basically. Also on page 30, I believe it was, I have a huge mistake that needs to be corrected. Throg's Neck is spelled with one G. It is two G's. I refuse to let the Department of Transportation remove our double G's. So I humbly request.
I think that's actually the MTA.
I humbly request. I don't care what agency it is. We are fighting on behalf of the Bronx. Please add the extra G to Throg's Neck. Yes. Thank you. I'm curious to know how the Department of Sanitation is evaluating its programs and policies for compliance with the Fair Share Act and the CLCPA. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, especially regarding greenhouse gas emissions, waste incinerations, and landfilling, and the placement of waste facilities.
Yeah, so we have a long history of being out in front in the siting of facilities, and the sort of core principle of the 2006 SWMP was borough equity, so that every borough would be responsible for managing its own waste. We have largely achieved that principle for our residential waste stream, which is something that we're very proud of today. When we are siting new facilities, we go above and beyond the requirements of both local and state law around environmental review, around ensuring that those facilities are not presenting a new burden for our local communities, and that's something that we plan to continue.
Speaking of which, we'll go to a few different things. One, Patterson Houses implemented a 3-bin compost program, and I wanted to know if there were any updates on how that program is doing or coming along.
I don't have updates on that specific program, but I'm happy to find out and get back to you.
Great, thank you. I also wanted to know how do we put folks in touch to partner as community retailers for the waste baskets, and how we can get our local businesses informed.
Yeah, so you can reach out through our office, and we're happy to connect the the manufacturer of the bins with those local retailers and make sure that they can supply them.
Great. So the Bronx has a number of waste management transfer station plants, and I'm curious, when are these contracts contracted until? If we have those dates?
The Harlem River Yard Transfer Station is the primary facility that DSNY contracts with, and that's through 2034.
2034. Also, so there is the trash that goes from Queens and Brooklyn does a detour into the Bronx and then transfers from the Bronx to Selkirk. I'm curious if you know what that transfer time looks like on average, how long the trash or the containers are staying in the Bronx before they're transferred to Selkirk.
We don't know specifically for those trains, but we can find out. It certainly is dependent on time of year and other materials that are moving by rail. We share sometimes a locomotive with other cars, so they get combined when they're at that yard.
That would be great, just because I know, and having grown up there my entire life, every summer the smell from the train yard, it's summertime. So it's curious just to know what that looks like. I'm also curious to know, with the city's waste needing to be transported on water, and given our waterfront resiliency efforts, especially in communities like mine where I have Hunts Point and entire swaths of the waterfront, how is the agency prepping for climate changes and coastal changes? And has it begun to identify potential issues due to these climate changes?
Yeah, so with a waterfront transportation network, there's obviously concerns around sea level rise and coastal flooding. Where we took into account the new flood maps in the construction of facilities. Obviously, for facilities that were constructed before those flood maps were issued, we have had to take other resiliency approaches, either to put like deployable type technology in there, or other operational methods to try to protect the facilities in the event of flooding. We do also have our private contractors, both on the MGP and the paper side, both rely on the water to transport a lot of the product that they process for us. And so that's also a consideration on their side.
Thank you. And this is something very personal to me, given that it's not only my district, but this is where I grew up. My childhood memories are here. 3rd Avenue, the hub. I have to thank Frank Laterra and the entire sanitation team and department for all the great work that they have been doing there. I credit the last administration for adding 21 sanitation workers for constant just support in an area that is heavily needed. The city has now just approved another construction project in the middle of the hub, in addition to all the other construction projects that we have. It is a hotspot of development, both construction, but also dealing with a number of drug overdose issues, just regular cleanliness in general, given the fact that this area, which I don't have to tell you guys, is the most visited place in New York City after Times Square on a daily basis, yet we have a lack of resources to actually deal with the pedestrian traffic and obviously the sanitation needs that come with that. I'm curious what the new admin's plan is for these 21 workers, and given the new construction and everything that has just been approved last week by this new admin, if there's any commitment to keeping those workers providing the services that they need to make sure that the Bronx is being centered and kept clean in our #1 hotspot area.
Yeah, so those additional resources are still in place today. They've been continued by the new administration, and we are continuing to evaluate the resource allocation across the entire city as we go through the executive budget process. So I think that's sort of where things stand today.
Is there any way that we can get a commitment or some understanding that the workers and the service, or at least the service of delivery that the workers provided at this level will be sustained throughout this new administration?
So we are providing that service at that level today, and we're evaluating resource allocations across the city.
Okay, I would like to make sure that we get that on record, especially as, we have it because we're still in this fiscal year, but I know once the fiscal year ends, we are not guaranteed, and I would really love to see a firm commitment by the administration and really uplifting, EJ communities like mine that really need the additional support, and that without the support that you have already done, we don't know where we would be, and knowing with the new construction that's being approved by this admin, specifically in this area, the additional help that we will need in addition to the 21 folks that we already have. Finally, but definitely not least, I want to talk about the leadership. Throughout the swamp, there was a number of times that the swamp set out to establish the department as the leader in the circular economy and urban resource recovery. I really want to talk about what that leadership means to you. I see one of the first projects was to convene a roundtable of folks. And so I want to see what leadership means to you. How do you define leadership in this sense, and what we should be looking at, how we should be looking at the city's leadership role in comparison to the rest of the country and the rest of the world?
Yeah, so I think leadership to me means being incredibly inclusive, and that means not only inviting folks to the table, but making sure that their voices are heard at that table. And that includes everyday New Yorkers who just care about their neighborhood and want to live on a clean, beautiful street. That also includes stakeholders and advocates who have been doing incredible work in this sector for many, many decades. And so I think my commitment as far as leadership is to bring those voices to the table, make sure that they're heard, and make sure that we're actually acting on what folks are saying. I think for a very long time, people have looked to other cities for innovation in the waste management space. I think what we have shown with our containerization programs, with our mandatory curbside composting program, is that we actually are a leader. And not only are we doing it better and earlier than other cities, but we're also doing it at a scale that other cities couldn't possibly imagine. And so we will continue doing that. And when we look back in 10 years at the results of this solid waste management plan, I think we will see that that New York City is not only a leader, but is also sort of setting the direction for cities globally in the waste management space.
Thank you for that. And, a lot of the conversation and discussion today have revolved around what I think is also, culture and community and society. And a lot of the programs, from organics to recycling to a lot of the work that the department does, really comes from community buy-in, from the culture that we set and the tone that we set. And so I'm curious to see, for our programs to reach a success rate and a diversion rate where I think we'll all be happy about, and that we really need it to get to build a sustainable community that we want to live in and thrive in, we need to have a culture shift. And so how, if at all, has the agency had this conversation about what a culture shift would entail? And have you had this conversation or continue to have this conversation with the majority of New Yorkers, what their culture, what trash culture means to New Yorkers, and how we develop our trash culture to meet our actual culture, or how we are shifting that culture, and what we have to do to plan for either a buy-in into this culture shift, or how do we work around it? So just your general thoughts there.
Yeah, so I think that's I've never heard it sort of framed that way, and I really appreciate that framing, because New York is such a blending of cultures, both the fact that we're a city of immigrants, and that people bring their sort of thoughts and approaches and history of waste management with them to New York City, but also we have so many different neighborhoods, and every neighborhood has a different sort of feel and vibe and energy. And so we have to not only sort of listen and understand what people sort of bring to the table, but also be adaptable as we roll out programs. We can't take the same program in the Upper East Side and in the South Bronx and expect it to be successful in both places.
And to close this off, I turn it back to you. Are there any questions that I have not asked that I should have asked that you are curious or that I should be curious about?
No, I think you have covered, you and your colleagues have covered certainly the breadth of issues related to the solid waste management plan and many other sanitation issues. I would say that I just look forward to working with you over the course of the next many years that we have these chairs together and make New York City a cleaner, healthier place for the future.
Thank you so much, and I apologize that 2.5 hours wasn't enough for testimony. I thank you, everyone. Oh, there's no one else here. I thank you all for your time. We will take a 5-minute break and move on to our next panel. Thank you so much. We are back. Can we have our next panel up? We were bringing up the Independent Budgeting Office.
Hi, good morning. I'm the committee counsel. I'll be swearing you in. Brian Kane, Assistant Director for Housing, Infrastructure, and Environment. Ryan Doherty, Lead Budget and Policy Analyst, and Elliot Jackson, Onkush, I'm sorry, Assistant Data Manager. Could you please raise your right hands? Thank you. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the council members, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do. Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may begin when ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Sanchez. I am Ryan Doherty, Lead Budget and Policy Analyst at the New York City Independent Budget Office. I'm joined today by Brian Kane, Assistant Director of Housing, Environment, and Infrastructure, and Elliot Jackson Onkush, Assistant Data Manager. As you know, IBO is an independent, non-mayoral city agency that conducts fiscal and policy research. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the city's curbside organics collection program today. Last Friday, IBO published a report titled Curbside Composting, Current Trends in New York City's Organics Collection. My testimony will highlight key takeaways from this research as it relates to today's discussion on DSNY's draft solid waste management plan, also known as the SWMP. As already discussed today, organic waste includes food scraps, yard waste, and other compostable materials. Organics represent roughly 36% of the city's residential waste stream. Yet in 2025, organics collections amounted to just 2.4% of residential waste collected. IBO's analysis found that the city's mandatory composting program, launched in October 2024, produced early progress, but the most meaningful gains were driven by fine-based enforcement. In April 2025, when fine-based enforcement began, weekly organics collection tonnage nearly tripled over the 4-week period. That sharp response suggests that fine-based enforcement is an effective tool to increase compliance. When enforcement was effectively paused later that month, momentum stalled for the rest of the year. From May through December 2025, the final months of the Adams administration, weekly organics tonnage declined by 43%. Interestingly, collections did not immediately revert down to pre-enforcement levels. This suggests that many residents continued composting once the habit was established. Overall, organics collections increased from 1.4% of residential waste in 2024 to 2.4% in 2025, a 68% increase. However, the gradual downward trajectory after the pause demonstrates that enforcement was effective at encouraging compliance, and without it, progress plateaued and then declined. Under the Mamdani administration, some fines were issued from January through March 2026, but it's been roughly 3% of the levels seen at this time last year. As IBO highlighted in our testimony on the preliminary budget, the organics processing budget is underfunded. It decreases after fiscal year 2026 from $24 million to a baseline of $19 million, despite DSNY expecting program growth over time. Further, there has not been a major mayoral announcement to resume full enforcement and encourage compliance under the new administration. Organic waste collection has historically been more expensive per ton than trash or recycling collections, largely driven by the high cost of staffing trucks relative to the tonnage collected on a route. Trucks collecting organics compared with recycling or trash have similar staffing and fuel costs, but collect fewer tons along their routes. This undercuts collection efficiency. A past IBO report found that in 2019, the average cost of organics collection was $602 per ton. By comparison, the cost of trash collection was $86 per ton and $167 per ton for recycling. Diverting organic matter from trash streams can reduce costs by increasing the efficiency of organics truck collections while reducing the volume of trash to be collected. The DSNY's 2026 Zero Waste Report includes organic projections through 2036. The agency expects a linear increase of collections, roughly following the rate of annual gains from 2023 through 2025. By 2036, this would increase the current diversion rate of 2.4% up to 11.5% for organics, or about 1/3 of residential organic waste. DSNY's model used information on New York City's recycling program and curbside organic programs in places like Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the state of Vermont to inform its 10-year projections. These other programs had little to no enforcement in their early years. This suggests DSNY's model similarly assumes little to no enforcement for New York City's curbside organics program. IBO's findings suggest that collections could exceed DSNY's projections if full enforcement is resumed to help build up initial sorting habits. This would help reach the economies of scale IBO estimates organics collections would need to reach cost parity with recycling. Similarly, while the draft SWMP mentions enforcement as a concept, it does not expressly indicate whether DSNY will resume full organics enforcement going forward. IBO's report also provided a description of San Francisco's system. They have the longest running and most successful curbside organic system in the country. San Francisco does not use fine-based enforcement. Instead, they first launched in 2009, San Francisco properties paid for their trash pickup, but not their recycling or organics. This made it cheaper for properties to divert recycling and organics out of trash bins. While different, San Francisco's system and New York City's fine-based enforcement both created a financial incentive to divert organics with measurable results. IBO's testimony here today is intended to provide further information on to the City Council and the public. IBO does not make policy recommendations and does not take a position on the appropriate level of enforcement. Ultimately, the goal is to build up a culture of sorting organics, recyclable materials, and waste properly. In line with DSNY's projections to increase organics diversion rates, the evidence from last year strongly suggests that fine-based enforcement is an effective way to encourage compliance. The trajectory of the city's organics diversion rate will be heavily shaped by the decisions made in the months ahead around outreach, education, and enforcement. We hope this analysis is useful to the committee. IBO is happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Be great to have my mic on. Thank you so much. So I understand that the recent report on curbside composting states that IBO will update earlier analysis on this issue. Your report states that the 2025 organics diversion rate was a mere 2.4%, despite organics potentially making up to 36% of the waste stream. Very sad. I'm looking at you, City. Very sad. How does that play into the overall cost of residential curbside organics programs?
This is, like you mentioned, this is something that IBO plans to update as we get more data from the mandatory program. So it did just start last year, so we're waiting for more before we can compare to when the program was voluntary. However, as mentioned today, when we reach economies of scale, we should see cost savings.
Great. And when we do get that, if when you do start writing the report, if you can keep in the back of your mind what changes we could make to make curbside composting more economical, would really love to see that once we have a
Absolutely, yeah.
report. Can you describe what some of the most prominent costs, whether financial or otherwise, emotional, that are attributable to the practice of landfilling organic waste?
Yes, so currently in the city, it costs approximately the same for an organics truck to collect. It's the same salary for same salary positions. So whether it's a organics truck or a trash truck, it's the same staffing on the truck. So if the truck ends up not being full by the end of the route, then you're spending a lot more money on staffing for little waste collected. And that's currently, since the city's not seeing the participation rate that it was, it's hoping for, that's currently attributing to a lot of the cost.
And the report mentions a pay-as-you-know collection system, providing financial incentives to residents for reducing their refuse volume by recycling organic waste. When y'all reviewed this type of program, what did y'all identify as some of the obstacles to its implementation? And how can New York City, if at all, prepare itself for some of these potential issues?
Right. So thank you for that question. Just to reiterate, IBO does not make policy recommendations as to which system is better. However, when we were looking at San Francisco, there's a key difference in that DSNY collects residential waste. In San Francisco, it's a private company that collects all of their commercial and residential waste. So their incentive is to make money and also reduce costs. So they had initially had this program where it was save as you throw, but the main finding in the report was that once they reduced the incentive, they also saw declines in their diversion rate. So incentives were seen to increase diversion rates for organic waste.
Human psychology. Speaking of San Francisco, in your review of that program, were you able to identify the effectiveness, if at all, of any of their educational materials being left at residences that helped increase diversion rates? How does this compare to the effectiveness of our education outreach programs? And have you seen any other educational programs either in San Francisco or elsewhere that have shown to improve effectiveness?
Thank you for that question. So we did focus on San Francisco. We did not look into any other educational programs. However, San Francisco also tied incentives with their educational programs. So there was a dual strategy, as DSNY is also trying to achieve at the moment. They're both important, is what the findings show.
Great. And now I will turn this over to y'all. Are there any questions that you thought I would ask you that I did not ask you?
I think that the hearing before this was very informative, and I think a lot of my questions that I had were answered. Do you have anything you want to add? No, that was great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And you guys can, what's the proper way to say this? I don't want to. This panel is dismissed. Get out of here. Sashay away. I'm sorry, my dears. Great. Wrong one. Alrighty. I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. You're allowed to laugh. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings or sing as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings or your songwriting to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on the legislation being heard today or today's hearing topics, finalizing the city's 2026 to 2036 solid waste management plan. If you have a written statement or additional testimony, if you don't finish, and you wish to submit it for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant of Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. And now I'd like to bring up the first panel. Can I have Dennis Schock? Can I have Rhonda Kaiser? And Matthew Civello? I hope I said that correctly. Is it Civello or Civello? Civello. Thank you. Great.
Good morning, Good morning, Chair Justin Suarez. Sanchez, I'm sorry. I like to take the opportunity to speak today. My name is Dennis Schock. I stand before you proudly representing the Uniform Sanitation Association, Local 831, the men and women who work tirelessly to keep the city clean, safe, and moving, especially during the most challenging conditions. I'd like to bring up some issues about equipment. One is the skid steer. Skid steer I would like to address. The skid steers are a force multiplier in snow operations. One skid steer can perform the work of up to 16 sanitation workers over a 12-hour shift. These machines are essential in clearing crosswalks, bus stops, pedestrian pathways, public safety where is most at risk. However, we currently do not have enough of the trailers that transport these units quickly to areas in need of most. We need to expand the training and more of these members to be qualified and operate this critical equipment. We strongly urge to invest in additional skid steers, transport trailers, operating training, and also allow for members to respond faster, to work efficiently and better to protect the public. Second, I want to raise the issue of serious concerns about quality of equipment and materials currently being used. Our members work on traction chains, plow blades, and replacement parts made up of inferior steel. That is prone to failure. This leads to frequent breakdowns during active operations, forcing equipment out of service at its worst possible times. We have seen firsthand higher grade materials used in the past last longer and perform better under extreme conditions. Local 831 would like to return to higher quality materials, standards, investing in durability and reduce downtime, improve reliability, and ensure that members can stay on the streets longer than doing their jobs. Sorry for going over.
You're all good.
This is all something new for me.
You are all good. I will make sure we have the rest of the testimony, and it will be in the written record. Thank you so much, Dennis. I really appreciate it.
Have a great day now, and thank you for your time.
Too.
Good morning, Chair Sanchez and council staff. I'm Rhonda Kaiser, Program and Policy Director for Cafeteria Culture, which you know. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the DSNY's draft SWMP. We're deeply grateful for the city's commitment to expanding organics diversion and to funding community composting and compost education. We urge the DSNY, though, to prioritize funding and expansion of local composting rather than relying heavily on co-digestion. Now, at Cafeteria Culture, our New York City Public School students are shifting the trash culture across the city in schools one at a time. They're reducing school food waste at the source and processing cafeteria food scraps locally. To reduce school food waste at the source, we're piloting our Mindful Choice Meals initiative at New York City Public Schools across all 32 districts. In our pilot schools, our initiative has reduced overall cafeteria food waste by up to 50%, while increasing student cafeteria food consumption by as much as 45%, by simply allowing students to choose what they want to eat within the USDA guidelines. Now, to process cafeteria food scraps locally, in just one partner school, our newly hired compost coordinator has walked over 1,200 pounds of cafeteria food scraps to Compost Power's site at Polo Grounds, who Compost Power also operates the Patterson Houses site that you mentioned earlier. Our students' participation in composting their own food scraps turns their daily cafeteria routines into climate action and community engagement by transforming a potential waste burden into a local resource. And we urge the DSNY to rethink their commitment into the SWMP to long-term expansion of co-digestion, which it sounds like they have today, and biosolids infrastructure through 2036. Co-digestion, as we know, plays an important role in managing our wastewater, but local composting of our food scraps reduces truck traffic, builds public participation, produces compost that is actually used in the city, and creates opportunities for local jobs and local stewardship, especially in schools and NYCHA communities. And if New York City wants organics diversion to succeed long-term, community compost has to be a core investment, not a supplemental program. Thanks again for your opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
I'm Matthew Savello, Chair of the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I'm delivering testimony on behalf of all 4 SWMPs. The SWMPs support the diversion targets set in the draft 2026 Solid Waste Management Plan of 30.5% for DSNY managed waste and 54.1% for commercial waste. On January 16th, we submitted comments identifying 6 areas in the draft plan that we believe require remediation to increase the likelihood that these targets will be met. Those 6 areas are the need for increased and well-defined public engagement, the requirement that open data sets be clearly defined and consistently maintained, alignment with the CLCPA and Climate Action Council Scoping Plan and Local Laws 152, 86, and 87, a provision for a clear organizational and structural commitment within the Department of Sanitation to support recycling and sustainability, a recognition of emerging regulatory and legislative frameworks in New York State and beyond that call into question the feasibility of beneficial use of biosolids, and the need to move the plan's language towards clear stated program commitments rather than language that is merely exploratory. We will submit our full set of comments with some adjustments because there's a new draft, I guess, and our written testimony will be based on that for this hearing. There's not only a social and environmental benefit to diverting material from the residential waste stream, but also a fiscal one. While diversion will neither eliminate nor significantly reduce costs, since funding follows material and diversion programs require investment in collection and processing, every dollar spent diverting material away from landfill or incineration has the potential to retain economic activity, create jobs, expand tax base, and increase public investment within the city. If we consider the fiscal spending on recycling and composting also as a form of fiscal stimulus with an associated non-trivial multiplier effect, we begin to see a more equitable distribution of both the burdens and benefits of shifting what is now nearly $600 million in export budget to recycling and composting within the 5 boroughs. I want to thank you for this opportunity to
Thank you so
provide
much.
testimony.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And with that, this panel is dismissed, and I'd like to call up the next panel. Can I please have Marissa Dominicus, I didn't want to mess it up, Justin Wood, and Janelle Scott. Oh, and Eric Goldstein. A tissue.
Hello.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Lovely to meet you. Okay, where do I begin?
Thank you.
It was great to.
Apologies. Okay, and with that, we can get started.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Chair Sanchez, and I was delighted to meet you and to hear the testimony from DSNY, and it seems like we're off to a good start. I'm the ED and the co-founder of Earth Matter, and I want to applaud all the efforts in the swamp. The one area I'd like to emphasize is the parallel trend of commercial collection or mandating of waste diversion at the same time as rolling this program out. I think it's essential since they are contributing to 40% of the waste stream in New York, and I think that will be beneficial to the overarching plan. And now, my Earth Matter hat. We focus on education. We're on Governor's Island. We diverted 700 tons that we processed from both Big Reuse, Lower East Side, and our very own Governor's Island. We're a small compost facility, and we urge you in the swamp to expand the language to say it's necessary to be able to invest in local, decentralized compost facility and the educational components that we, as well as the other community composting network organizations, provide. We train over 90 groups, and when I say in 2014, we had LaGuardia student make posters for her building, and the building maintenance didn't put the compost bins back in the same area, I will say that that building maintenance, like Gail Brewer said, the certification program that Mr. Anderson had talked about is critical. Training, education, we need it. We need certification for the building owners, and we need it for our young students, and we need to expand what we can do. When Mr. the Sanitation talked about skid steer training, we do that at Earth Matter. Thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you for a very long time.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
There we go. Hi, my name is Jenny Scott, and I'm the Climate Director at Align, and a member of the Transform Don't Trash Coalition. Thank you so much to Chair Sanchez for the opportunity to present testimony today. We think that this solid waste plan, the draft solid waste plan, is really central to shaping the future of waste in New York City for the next decade. I think that this plan needs to meet the urgency of the climate crisis, as well as addressing longstanding environmental injustices and centering workers here in New York. We look forward to reviewing the updated plan, which we learned is on the website as of Friday. But I think just to use this as an opportunity to uplift that the biggest concern we had was around the vagueness of the plan and how it was framed as a framework. We think that it missed a lot of timelines and benchmarks and things that were really essential. So we're hoping that those are things that are considered in the updated draft. And also wanted to use the opportunity to uplift the Transform Don't Trash's People Swamp, which is a concrete list of 30 community-driven recommendations that or coalition work to put together. And this includes suggestions around reducing truck traffic and getting to waste equity, full accountable implementation of the commercial waste zone program, which if it's done before December 28th, we are okay with that in 2027, meeting the zero waste diversion goals and making sure that's in line with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act mandates, major expansion into compost and organics infrastructure, waste reduction and reuse policies, phasing out reliance on incineration, sustainable funding, environmental justice accountabilities, and equitable service provisions, especially for NYCHA residents. So the written testimony I'll provide will give a lot more details on all of those recommendations, but we think that the council has a really essential role to play in approving the final swamp before it's sent to the state DEC. So we just really urge the council, as we're reviewing this updated draft, that you're considering the necessary specificity and accountability that is necessary in that plan, and to incorporate the 30 recommendations in our People Swamp. And then we hope that this will allow us to work better with the council, Department of Sanitation, and all our stakeholders here to realize that vision of creating a more equitable plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do have a follow-up question. So one of the common threads of community conversation that has happened is wanting more specificity in the plan, wanting more attainable action items. From understanding, this is, in 2006, I was a sophomore in high school. So from my understanding, I would like to understand better why advocates would like more. Of course, you want things to hold people accountable for, but I think one of the strengths also that you can argue with having such an open-ended language in the swamp is we see how climate change is affecting us. We see how rapidly technology is evolving. We see all of these different things. Do we want, and we saw from the 2006 one, no, the 92 swamp, a lot of the projects and ideas that were talked about there that had actionable timelines, we don't even have the Fresh Kills landfill anymore. So I just want to be understanding if we lock in some of these terms with what we see the world as we have it today, as opposed to having this open-end language so that folks can make adjustments. What do you see are the pros and cons? Is that a wrong way at looking at this? Or is there a way to shift the mindset so that we can get both? Or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I think it's a mix of both because if the plan is too open-ended, like this is supposed to be essentially the floor for a lot of the policies that we will develop in the solid waste industry. So if it's too open-ended, then it doesn't really put a lot of consideration into a lot of the concerns that have been raised by community members. So I think it's necessary for us to have like some more specificity around how some of the goals will be attained or how some of the benchmarks will be reached. Otherwise, like I said, it's just very open-ended. And you're right that things are constantly changing. So I think the plan does need to have some flexibility there, but on some of the more specific things, especially things that were brought up in the 2006 plan, which was a 20-year plan that haven't been done, like what is the plan to actually get those done? I think those things need to be more specific while leaving the space to have that open-endedness that you mentioned. But right now it feels like it's just very open-ended and it's more of a framework as opposed to having like some of that specificity that's really needed for some of those areas.
Thank you. And one final follow-up question. In terms of accountability, you mentioned stuff that hasn't been completed from previous swamps. Are there any accountability mechanisms that folks would like to see implemented that have not been used before, or that you think are already working in terms of holding the department accountable to, frameworks and things that they put out?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for like everyone who's here, or everyone who's in the industry. But I think a lot of it, there are a lot of different mechanisms are needed for different areas. So I think like commercial waste zones was a thing that has been discussed a lot in this hearing and around commercial waste. And there were things that were mentioned around like having more GPS data and having things that DSNY is able to look at for a lot of the haulers. So I think they're sort of looking at those avenues and ways in which that we are able to use this plan in order to create those accountability mechanisms. I think there were some suggestions mentioned earlier about like maybe looking at NYCHA residents and how we could involve them more in the process. So I think there's like definitely accountability and our own data as well. Like a lot of data is not very easily accessible, and so if you're not getting the data that's easily accessible or easily understood, then you can't really hold the department accountable because you're not really sure how accurate things are or what's happening. So I think there could definitely be like some more accountability around data, which I know is mentioned for open data, and then some more aspects for involving more community input in a lot of the processes and plans that are being developed. And then, yeah, I know we talked about the commercial waste zone program as well and having some different avenues there too.
And this just came to me because we're talking about accountability, but not only department accountability, but are there ways that we can also be looking at personal accountability and ways that, if folks are living in public housing or subsidized housing or vouchers and you are a repeat offender, non-recycler or non-whatever that are really harming our communities, is there any accountability there? What does that look like, if that looks like anything at all? Has there been any conversation about that?
Yeah, I personally haven't had conversations like that. I'm sure other folks here have had conversations around like repeat offenders. I think, like you mentioned earlier, like a lot of it does have to do with, I think, a cultural shift and understanding. I think there's like that cultural shift and understanding of the importance of our environment and what it means for us to do proper waste disposal and diversion and all the different things, and also just reduction, like waste in this. We have a lot of waste and we're very wasteful. But I think also we have to make sure that the education is being carried out properly. I think we've heard from different avenues that education isn't really being done. And so sometimes you have repeat offenders because people don't know that they're supposed to be doing something or the way in which it's supposed to be done. So I think that having improved public education efforts is definitely necessary. I know that fines, everyone always thinks about money and how things are very expensive, so no one wants to get a fine. But I think first it has to be making sure that people actually understand what's required of them and what they need to be doing before we talk about fines and other mechanisms as well.
The problems of American consumerism.
American. Oh my God.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Hi, Justin.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Chair Sanchez, for holding this hearing and this opportunity, and congratulations to Commissioner Anderson. And thank you for the extensive testimony on topics including organics diversion, commercial waste zone implementation, and construction and demolition waste. We're looking forward. I'm I'm Justin Wood, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, member of Transform Don't Trash. We're looking forward to working closely with the council, sanitation department, and other parts of the Mamdani administration to implement all of this. We similarly have not fully read and compared the draft, and we do appreciate its publication on Friday, the revised draft SWMP. So we'll submit written comments. I can uplift a few themes from our previous comments from the 2025 SWMP hearing on this topic. On modeling, our understanding, unless this has changed, is that DSNY modeled increased diversion over 10 years. And we understand that modeling needs to be grounded in the reality of New York City. We would also urge that the SWMP, because this is a long-term plan, that we want to hold this administration and future administrations to that modeling also include what it would take, what diversion rates would be necessary or reduction rates in waste would be necessary to achieve the zero waste goals that the council and previous administration legislated, the community leadership, Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act emissions reduction goals that the state had set. We would stress that, according to the state's estimates, solid waste produces almost as much greenhouse gas emissions as the entire electricity sector. So this is significant, and we want the state to also, because this is a DEC process, to see this as a pathway to implementing that law. So we would like to see some ambitious modeling included in the SWMP. I would just also highlight, we'd like to see a plan for specific capital investments. We appreciate the reference to Rikers Island as a possible composting facility site. We'd like to see composting investments keep pace with the exciting developments in the commercial and residential side with organics waste development. And then finally, we also will uplift the need to maximize the use of existing extensive capital investments in the marine and rail transfer facilities to study and, if necessary, subsidize the reduction of VMT fuel and operating costs from simply taking some portion of commercial waste from places like Midtown Manhattan to a well-run, worker-friendly marine transfer station and avoiding trips to EJ communities. And then finally, we appreciate the stress on EPR as extended producer responsibility as a potential source of long-term funding for these initiatives. We would similarly stress that the state, if it moves forward with a cap and invest program as called for in the current CLCPA, that could be used as a major revenue source to help New York City implement these capital investments and programs. In the interim, we have called for the governor to implement a $3 billion sustainable futures fund, and that's also, we'd like to see solid waste capital and program development as a major thing that those programs support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Arthur?
Thank you, Chair Sanchez. Eric Goldstein of the Natural Resources Defense Council. The solid waste management planning process is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to rethink policy. We've got a new council, a new administration. We have a new commissioner, Greg Anderson, who's a good man, and we're happy he's on the scene. All of these issues affect the public in many ways: public health, quality of life, our economy. There's no rush. The council has legal authority to be involved in this planning process in a big way. According to 16-140 of the Administrative Code, no final solid waste management plan for the city shall be submitted to the state unless such submission has been authorized by the council by local law. So you already have the legal authority to be engaged in this process, and we hope the department will give the council the opportunity to review the revised draft and offer amendments to the plan before its final submission. This role of council oversight and engagement is essential, and the council should be full partners in the development of this plan. In other words, the council should develop a set of amendments it believes should be included in the final SWMP. My written testimony, I outlined 7 program areas where the plan, as strong as it is, should be strengthened. Let me just focus for a minute on organics. The organics section in particular needs some help. Organics is the largest portion of the waste stream. It's costing us a significant amount of money. Seattle has demonstrated that by composting organics, they are saving as much as $18 a ton, according to their most recent data, over landfilling it. So over time, as the IBO indicates, composting not only beneficial for the environment, but can save the city money. Right now, the place to start is with food rescue, where the verbiage is good, but much more can be done to ensure that all of the food generated in restaurants and commercial kitchens is sent over to help the 1.2 million New Yorkers who are food insecure. That's the place to start, and we need stronger elements on that. Then there's the issue of anaerobic co-digestion. That's the wrong way to deal with the organics that are collected. They should be actually composted. That means more composting capacity at Rikers Island and other places. We need stronger marketing, enforcement, and educational materials in the schools, but also in the public more generally. We need to ensure that community composting is supported. We need legislation to advance commercial composting so that there's no question but that every commercial establishment is separating its organics for composting. We set forth all of these recommendations in our written testimony. Hope you will review them. Just one final word. The environmental justice issue, another area in need of strengthening. So you had talked before about job development and workforce development in NYCHA properties. Well, there's a program that has begun doing that. Compost Power is a nonprofit organization. There should be in the plan a vision for how Compost Power and other similar activities could be expanded throughout NYCHA so that NYCHA residents participate fully in not only composting, but in receiving all of the other benefits of our waste transfer station. Of our waste disposal system. Finally, we do support Intro 355, which in theory is also the topic of today's hearing, city agency waste, as well as the resolution on composting. We look forward to working with you in the weeks and months ahead, because this is really a critical point, and it's an opportunity that the council only gets on very rare occasions to influence policy in a broad and big direction. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to also try to answer the question you posed to Janelle about the role of the plan, because the role of the council and the role of the plan are significant. And if the plan is simply a general document that is so broad that it doesn't drive policy, then we all haven't accomplished very much. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And with that, this panel is dismissed. I'm seeing no online testimony. Going once, going twice. Are there any new members of the bustling crowd that would like to testify? Empty seat number 1. Empty seat number 2. All right, seeing none. With that, the Sanitation and Solid Waste Management Committee hearing of April 6th, 2026 has come to an end.